Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning for our City Council work session. We'll go ahead and get started. Connie, could you please call the roll?
Here.
Here.
Mangum. Mansfield.
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
Paulson.
Here.
Black.
Here. Thank you. We'll move to agenda item 2, Historic Preservation Commission update. Representatives from the Historic Preservation Commission, HPC, will discuss the commission's goals and projects as well as council's policies and expectations.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Jim Anglesey, Long Range Planner for City of Pocatello, as well as the Historic Preservation Commission Liaison. I have here with us today our chair, Marty Vizcarra, and he will take the rest of the time and share with you what's going on with the HPC.
Good morning, Marty.
Morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'd like to kind of start off with a description of our recent accomplishments here. In coordination with a consultant, we have completed our project to overhaul the downtown historic district design standards with council's adoption in July. These new standards will provide a more objective review and streamlined process for certificates of appropriateness. We have continued design reviews of exterior alterations in the downtown Pocatello Historic District. In fiscal year 2024, one application for a certificate of appropriateness has been reviewed by the commission, and 3 COAs have been administratively approved by planning staff. COAs that have commission reviewed this year include the following: a new awning for the purpose building's rear facade, new signage for Q's and Brews, new signage for drape interiors, new awning material for Station Square. Moving into current and upcoming projects, we are currently in the process of overhauling the city's historic preservation plan in coordination with the consultant. This plan update is supported by the city's comprehensive plan and will lay the foundation of the HPC's priorities, as well as what activities the city will seek grants for as part of the yearly requests within the CLG grant program. A draft of the plan is tentatively scheduled to come to council by the end of the year in a work session. The plan is expected to be completed mid-spring 2025. We are in the beginning stages of hiring a consultant to complete a new survey and National Register nomination for Downtown Historic District. This project is made possible by a $17,000 grant from the CLG grant program, which was awarded to the city earlier this year. This work will include the surveying of 200 buildings properties featuring the update of data on properties that are already included in the National Register, as well as properties that may now be eligible to be included on the National Register. As a reminder, the National Register of Historic Places program is completely honorary and is not subject to local design standards unless the property is located within the locally protected historic district. This honorary status also enables property owners to seek grant money and tax credits for building preservation and rehabilitation services and activities. The Brady Chapel Centennial Campaign continues. As of this week, phase 1 of the restoration of the chapel has concluded. The phase included cleaning, repointing, and resealing the chapel's exterior masonry, as well as the installation of the chapel's pinnacles. If you have not seen the chapel lately, I do encourage you to please pay it a visit. Fundraising and grant efforts continue to be ongoing, and we can raise enough monies to completely restore the historic structure. The Friends of the Brady Chapel have received a grant to restore the chapel's rose windows and are currently working on a grant to repair and restore the roof. After the exterior of the building is shored and preserved, we will be working on funding the interior restoration. We are continuing our efforts to coordinate with city staff and property owners on protecting the city's historic assets. These assets play a critical role in the identity of Pocatello. We continue our efforts to provide the public opportunities to learn more about our city's history. As part of our responsibility as a commission, we continually seek new opportunities to increase our efforts to educate the public on the importance of historic preservation, as well as the significance of our city's history. We are passionate about the preservation of our city's history and want to ensure that this important endeavor is clearly understood by the community and that access to information is simplified for property owners and preservationists in Pocatello. We want to be a resource for everyone who desires to protect and preserve the city's history, as well as the significant cultural and economic value these historic buildings and places provide. Thank you for this opportunity for the Historic Preservation Commission to provide this update and for your continued support in our efforts to preserve the history, culture, and identity of Pocatello. We would be happy to answer any questions, if any, at this time.
Council, any questions that you might have?
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I've got Councilmember Cheatham and then Council President Lyric.
I am curious if you have an estimate of what Phase 2 of the Brady Chapel restoration might cost.
I believe we have an estimate at the moment. I will say that given bids for our current phase, I would expect that they have escalated at this point. I do not know that we have an exact number at the moment. I usually shoot for 10 to 15% higher, but even that could be a stretch. We know that that is a very specific trade, so I do expect that it would be higher. I, as always, will advocate for the historic preservation of that structure, and whatever we can do to find grants, monies, resources to make that happen.
I still didn't hear a number.
Do you know?
We have an older estimate.
Yes.
And we can get that to you. I don't know it off my head.
Our current phase was originally estimated at 90,000, I believe. No? Do you remember what it was? I don't have that numbers off
Originally,
the top
it
of my head.
was 50-something, then it went to 60-something, and it ended up close to 80, 90.
Yeah.
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 So that was where it ended, but it went up substantially from the original estimate.
Yeah. We can definitely get you that information, though. We have done some research, working with local architects here to get some information on it. So we have a pretty good idea, but we know that it is going to have increased since we had originally looked at it.
Do you remember what that idea is?
I do not off the top of my head.
Okay. So how long ago was that bid?
Had to have been a year and a half or so ago.
Okay. Yeah, Jim, if you'd just send that to the council and let the council know what that looked like and remind everybody, though, in that email that that's a year and a half old. And everybody will kind of do their math in their head. Is that all right, Rick?
Yes.
Okay. Linda?
I wanted to thank you for streamlining the design standards, and I like that I'm hearing on the certificates of appropriateness that those don't all have to come before the commission, that the staff can handle a lot of those. It just seems like a more effective method to deal with things like signage and where our staff are the ones who are kind of the experts in those codes and the ones who would enforce them and everything, while the commission can focus on the preservation issues. So I think it's a good direction to go in, and I like that streamlining. Yeah.
I would absolutely agree. I believe that streamlined process has made a significant difference in approvals at this moment. And being able to communicate with those property owners directly, I'm sure Jim can attest to it, is significantly more efficient process.
And I'm also thrilled to hear about Phase 1 being complete on the Brady Chapel and moving forward. One of the issues we faced is exactly what we were just talking about, the costs going up from when we first started the campaign. All costs of materials and construction and everything has gone up, as we all know. So it's encouraging that we've got that first phase done. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. You do an incredible job for the city. So Marty, thank you for leading that charge for us.
Absolutely, thank you. And I would like to take special recognition for Jim, who honestly is the backbone of this commission to make sure that we all know that what's taking place. You guys really have a fantastic employee here, so thank you.
Super. Thank you, Jim, also. Thank you. With that, we'll move to agenda item number 3 is Planning and Zoning Commission updates. Representatives from the Planning and Zoning Commission will discuss the commission's goals and projects as well as council's policies and expectations.
Morning, Mr. Mayor, council members, Matthew Lewis, senior planner, and also staff liaison to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Appreciate your time this morning. Before me this morning, I have our chair, Richard Phillips, and I'll have him go ahead and go through this last year with the commission, and then have any questions that the council may have.
Super.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'll start with the current Planning and Zoning Commissioner, or list of commissioners, excuse me. Myself serving as chair, newly elected Vice Chair Adam Geyer. The rest of the council consists of Eugene Bartu, Marjana Hewlett, and newly appointed members Benjamin Gomez, Annie Mendoza, and Desiree Valladolid. From the period beginning September 13th, 2023 to September 11th, 2024, the commission has reviewed 7 preliminary plats with a public hearing held and decisions rendered. In comparison, the commission reviewed 7 preliminary plats in 2023. 4 zone map amendment requests with findings of facts and recommendations provided to the council. 3 applications were reviewed in 2023. 3 annexation applications were reviewed with finding of facts and recommendations submitted to the council, which included a public hearing for much of the South Fifth Avenue area. 3 annexation applications were reviewed in 2023. 2 comprehensive plan map amendments were considered with a public hearing and written recommendation provided to the council. The commission held 2 public hearings as well as 1 special meeting in consideration of the pending sign code repeal and replace. And Brent McLean, Planning and Development Director, and Matthew Lewis, Senior Planner, typically hold a training session with commission members every February or anytime a refresher is needed. One was held last evening for our new members, and I am here to answer any questions if you have any.
Questions, council? Councilmember Cheatham?
Is the membership full on the P and Z?
It is full. We have
It is
7
complete?
members. Yeah, we had, you're probably aware, we had somewhat of a mass resignation. We had half of the members leave in July. And so we appreciate the appointment of the 3 new members. We are currently fully staffed.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, last week we were able to top that off. That's tough. Any other questions? Richard, you put a target on your back, so thank you very much. As the chair, that's a difficult commission to lead and direct, so thank you for taking that on. It's an extremely important
Of course.
commission for the city, the planning and zoning, and so we've had a rough patch, there's no doubt, but we appreciate everybody, and please extend that appreciation to the rest of the commission. It's amazing to have people in our community that will for no pay, for just volunteer their time to get beat up, I feel like, and so thank you very much for your willingness to do that. It's like, I can't stress how important that is for the city council and the mayor and for our planning department and the work. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Yeah, of course.
And Matt, thanks for helping with that and leading everybody through that mess.
Thank you, Mayor.
So, yeah.
Appreciate it.
Do appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you.
council.
Yep. With that, we will move to agenda item 4 as proposed to September fiscal year 2024 budget amendments. Finance Department staff will be in attendance to present to council detailed information on proposed fiscal year 2024 September budget amendments for the public hearing to be held September 19, 2024. Good morning, Brandy.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Brandy Myers with the Finance Department. So I will do a quick overview of our budget amendments for September, which will actually conclude our fiscal '24. Our proposed budget amendments is for $736,464,000. I just wanted to kind of highlight 4 or 5 of them that are actually the big ticket ones. The rest of them are more of donations and reimbursements that the departments are wanting to use. The first one that I have is for the Community Rec Center. They're wanting $121,400, and this is just for repairs at the rec center that were unexpected, as well as the cost of increased prices for the goods. The second one is for $223,393,000, which is for the front half of the rec center's remodel. That will be paid out of the general fund reserves. The third one is for library. It is for $111,169,000, and that is for the repair of the new elevator. That will come out of their fund reserves as well. Next, we have there's been some back and forth on how this is done. This is going to be for our employee payouts for the general employees. This is for people that have retired after they have put in their intent, so we've moved money over into Fund 952, or this is for someone who has just decided to leave and we're paying out vacation. For that particular fund, the department totals is $1,384,497,000. In Fund 95, and there is a mistake on my paperwork here, it should be Fund 972. That is the new fund that we created this year for the enterprise employees. We wanted to make sure that we had a very clear split between our enterprise employees and our tax-based. So their payouts is $19,854,000.
So Brandy, you have on your paperwork, on our paperwork, it's 972.
On my little spreadsheet here, the bottom half, if it's correct on yours, then I must have
Okay,
you have the updated copy.
yeah.
So that's all that I have for you. Do you have any questions for myself or the departments?
Questions, council? I think all of this is pretty straightforward. We've talked about all of these, and so and approved those in different meetings, and so don't think there's any surprises.
Okay,
Okay, super. Brandy, thank
Okay.
you very much.
thank you.
Then we will move to, that was quick, Brandy. You need to do that every time. We'll move to agenda item 5 is city rebranding project update, Hub Collective. Representatives from Hub Collective and city staff members will be in attendance to present an update to the council regarding the city of Pocatello's rebranding project and receive council's feedback. Yeah. And council, from what I understand, the slides that you're looking at here are not all of the slides that they have. Hub has brought a lot more. We just didn't want to kill 15 trees, I don't think, for all of them, so. What, I'm curious, staff, they're here in the middle and you're as far left and away as you can get. Okay, all right. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's gonna go up there. This is fun.
We might need our IT to come and,
Okay, I got it.
Got it.
Just saw that one.
Mirror. Arrange, so up and then.
Billboards.
Sorry, oh, gosh.
Rebranding. Is it email? No, it's in the agenda. Oh, I was like, what?
Maybe I can push it over here. We'll do
Oh,
this.
there we go.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Look at that. All right.
look at that.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see all of you again. It's been a little while, so we wanted to do really two things today.
Before we get going, would you please state your names and what company you're with for the people watching?
Thank you, Mayor. We are Hub Collective out of Portland, Oregon. My name is Jennifer Gibbard. I'm the Director of Creative Development.
And I'm Brian Buenacosa Brooks. I'm a creative strategist. And anything else before we dive right in?
I think you dive in there. Everybody outside needs to know who's talking.
Absolutely.
So.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so we've been working with the city for the past several months on developing
the right brand direction for the city. And so we wanted to share with you a little bit of what that process has been like, who all we've talked to, what we've come to the conclusions about, and then we wanted to share 3 different directions that we have on the table to decide about which one we're going to go with. And that decision is ultimately going to be up to you to make that decision. So we wanted to share those 3. We talk about why we have those 3, why we think they're all good options, what are the advantages of each one, and then you have the opportunity to ask us any questions, think about any comments you have about where we're going with those 3 directions. And once you make a decision about that, we're going to dive right into thinking about how we use this as a system. So how does it get applied to all of the different things that need to be identified as from the city? Is that city vehicles? Is it signage? Is it PowerPoints? Is it presentations? So we're going to get into all those nitty-gritty details once we have a decision about which direction we're going to go in. So we started this project with these goals in mind, that we want to construct a brand system, so not just a logo, but a whole system that's visual, it's also messaging, that instills confidence in the city as a trusted service provider, inspires pride in place for the local community, builds a unique identity that differentiates you from your neighbors, considers how the brand may work with or complement your city flag, and is easy to read, use, and implement. So we started by visiting a couple of seasons ago when snow was still on the ground, and we had a lot of really great public engagement. We heard from a lot of different stakeholders and from the public at large. We held meetings at City Hall here. We went to the Marshall Library for an open session. We went to Franklin Middle School, and we were able to attend Brewfest. We got a lot of great comments after a few drinks had been imbibed and people were freely sharing their thoughts about Pocatello. And then we met with department leadership. We met with you, the council members, the Chamber of Commerce, the Realtor Association, the Downtown Association, Idaho State. So we could make sure that we're covering all of our bases, hearing all of their perspectives about Pocatello and what people want to see. And we captured a lot of great information. Here's some of the things that people said they loved about Pocatello, a lot about the outdoors, the mountains, the recreation activities, but also that paired with the cultural amenities that you have here. The people, it's not too big, it's affordable, the historic location, all of that sort of stuff. We also captured what people don't love. There's the sense of apathy, that there's this stuck in this way, it's always been done mentality that people bump up against a lot of the times. Those are some of the main important things that we captured there. But we also heard a fairly consistent version of success. If we put together everything we heard from all of these different groups, what came forward for us was that people want to see Pocatello be this hardworking mountain town with a can-do attitude and manageable growth that's improving your quality of life. That was pretty consistent based on what we heard from every single group that we talked to. And this is important for us because we can basically break that into 3 different sets and understand how each of those is speaking to an idea of where you want to invest, what kind of atmosphere you want, and the kind of attitude that people want to see on the street when they're interacting with their community. And this is important for us because this traces back to why even do branding in the first place? Because branding is not going to solve a lot of problems, right? There's many things that are outside the purview of branding, but it can really hone in on how an identity can shape this idea of investment, atmosphere, and attitude. Because if you have the right identity, that can help strengthen cohesion, which gives you a united vision about what you're investing in. It can unify your character, so you're having the right focus about atmosphere, and it can build pride so that there's this positive perception when it comes to attitude. So that's what we're really trying to think about. How can the brand help do these things? And what we heard also was that right now your identity is fragmented, that there's a lot of different opinions about what Pocatello is, even down to how you refer to yourself regionally. Are you the Gate City? Are you the Portneuf Valley? It's kind of half and half right now. We also heard that it really depends on who you're talking to. The people who grew up here and have stayed here for all their lives, the people who grew up here maybe moved away somewhere and came back, people who live in other parts of Idaho have a different perception of you, and people from other parts of the country and the world have a different perception. And we heard all of those different pieces as we were talking with everyone. And one thing that really came to the fore, though, is that there's also this tension between what was your past, the railroad town, the strong blue-collar, hardworking roots, and the present, where the railroad has become less relevant, and there's increasing job diversity. Because what we clearly heard was that you exist because of the railroad. That is why you are here. And that railroad also brought not only those first people, but it brought a lot of jobs. And it brought the industries that have kept people around, especially through the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. But as that railroad presence has decreased, and then that industry presence has also decreased, so has Pocatello's foundational reason for being. It's less present in people's minds because that railroad really told you who you were. And because of its lack of dominance today, there's sort of this blank space. We also heard a lot of people tell us what outsiders in Idaho call you, the armpit of Idaho. We heard that a lot from local people telling us, you know what everyone else in Idaho calls us, they call us this. And so there's this sense that, oh man, we're looking to these outside people to tell us who we are, and we're listening to them, and we don't like it, but we kind of are latching onto it. But of course, these people don't care about you. People calling you the armpit, they don't care about who you are. But it really seems like there's this sense of waiting for someone. Is it another train? Is it another industry? Like maybe it's Google who's going to move in and really like shape us and get us together. And what we're really thinking about is, okay, we need to find what's sort of the core essence underlying everything for Pocatello. How can we start to bring that forward so that you're not waiting for anyone else to tell you who you are? It's just coming from the people. It's coming from your community. So that's where we really wanted to start when we were thinking about this brand process. And one of the ways that we really start to articulate that is by identifying attributes that we want the brand to evoke.
Yeah, so in synthesizing all that we heard while we were here and working through what we were learning about the town, we settled on these attributes of accessible, hearty, genuine, easygoing, a little bit playful, open, supportive, accommodating, and there's a sense of anticipation here. And the way that this translates to us is a desired change or a feeling or emotion. So we want people to think about Pocatello and be like, oh, that was so, or the city, that was so easy. And that elicits the emotion of feeling very grateful for all that the city's providing. Or we have what it takes, and that gives a sense of pride. We don't put on airs. We're very connected. We're very community driven. We get along. This is that unified community feel that we experienced here. We don't take ourselves too seriously. That's a little bit of surprise and delight. There's space for me. Everyone feels like they belong in this community. People are looking out for me. I feel very valued as a member of the community. I've got everything that I need, and that gives you the confidence that the city is providing what you need. And that sense of anticipation boils down to, I can't wait for what happens next. And that builds some excitement. And so those are the attributes and the emotions that we brought to our studio team and said, this is what the brand should embody. This is what we want people to feel because it represents authentically what and who Pocatello is. So from there, we started playing around with visuals and thinking conceptually. But one thing that was very important was to understand the ecosystem that this brand was going to exist in. You guys have a lot of very well-established brands in and amongst the city. And a lot of those leverage some very signature attributes of your natural environment, your mountains, your landmarks, your way of life in the lookout. So there's a lot of things that are already very well known in the city that we wanted to take into account for.
And this is by no means an exhaustive representation. Even just on our trip today, I was looking at, oh man, the car dealership has a mountain in its logo, and this medical center has a mountain in its logo. So there are plenty of others here that we could consider as well.
So we thought about different conceptual approaches, and there were 4 different directions that we played around with to start the conversation. This notion of the gate city, so open gates, the space between, really embodying that valley feel that you have here, your heritage representing that small town grit, and this more playful direction of the one and only Pocatello. And so we did a wide swath of different directions. We honed in on some that were feeling like there was some excitement around, and we brought it to the city staff. We put out a survey. We said, here's what we've been doing. Here's some directions that people are excited about. Now it's time for your thoughts and considerations. And we got an overwhelming amount of responses. We have 256 come in. 78% of the people who took the survey finished it all the way through and gave us some really great insights.
And those insights influenced what you're going to see today as those 3 options.
So We're volleying back and forth. So we have two different things that we're looking at today. The start of a logo and visual brand system. So when we think about that system, you have your primary logo, you have variations on it, and then you have that whole system of color, type, application studies that fill that out. And then we have a tagline. So we have two different options there as well. And all of those can play together interchangeably. So if you like one tagline and one visual direction, those kind of come together and play seamlessly together. So we're going to step through each of those three here today and talk a little bit about them.
Yeah, and with each of those three, you'll see that we have paired it with a tagline just to see how it works. Again, that's not a recommendation on our part by any means. It's just we're trying to sort of suss out how do these things work together. So this first direction is this idea of the landscape of home. And this is that primary mark that we're proposing. So what we're trying to do here is bring forward a more abstract representation of your sense of place of the landscape. Again, because there are so many representations of your landscape in brands around the city, we didn't want to create any more confusion by trying to add another type of a mountain representation or a valley representation the way that the medical center does or the chamber does. We're like, what's another way we can bring that landscape forward? And so we thought of something that was a little more abstract, playing with contour lines. You can sort of read the mountain and valley landscape within the mark itself. And of course, what is this all surrounding? It's surrounding the city. So the city is sort of being represented by that P being held by this mountain landscape. And the other thing you'll start to see here, and you'll see it in each of these three directions in different ways, is how the city flag is starting to be considered in these brand directions. So here we brought the star from the city flag in. It's sort of a subtle nod to it in that upper left corner.
So you'll see each in black and white first, and then in the colorway that everyone's excited about, so a primary color application, and then variations on that. If we need a simple, more scalable version, we have a very simple, straightforward version. And then seeing how colors and different applications can play out with illustration, layouts, taglines, department lockups, putting it on a t-shirt, putting it on a business card. So we've printed out just 3 of these screens for you to kind of look at and go back and forth, not all of them.
And a vehicle, of course. And
business
a
card.
business card. All right, so that's direction 1. Direction 2. Jen, do you want to talk about direction 2?
Sure. We're calling direction 2 the space between. And this one is really using a very bold and iconic font treatment where we've incorporated the city flag imagery into it. It's very visible from a distance. It's embodied by its strength of character, the letter characters. So in a simplified state, it could be just your word mark. Or we have a playful version where we've knocked out the O and we're playing with that space between so that you can fill it in as you see fit. And it allows for a little bit more of a visual play. You're looking at it, you're being pulled in, and then using that O in creative ways to bring it to life. So in this variation, you can see we're using the O as that department lockup variation. We're using the letters as patterning. We're using the O as like a window into photography. So there's a lot of flexibility around it and a playful sense that can kind of give that welcoming feel. And then if we did go with some fun imagery, we can take that negative space, that space in between of the O, and put something that really embodies what life is like here into that image and associate it formally with the city.
Yeah, I think the real strength of this direction is that it has space to say, you, community, you are what is Pocatello. So there is a space for you within this logo to include you within it. And I'll mention with all of these, we also went with very simple, highly legible, bold fonts because we heard a strong desire to make sure that people could really read the name. We've heard people say, sometimes if people don't know who we are, they don't pronounce our name correctly, they don't know how to say it. So for each of these directions, there is a version that is very clear, you can sort of see all the letters very clearly out together. And then, of course, we've varied that as we see fit. So if you're speaking to a local audience, you can have a little more fun with it. But we wanted to make sure that that clear option was available in each of these three.
And a car.
Car. Business card. And the third direction, the compass rose. So this one is, again, bringing forward the star from the city flag, but thinking about it not only as that star, but as a representation of the compass rose, and thinking about how that can represent sort of a bright future for Pocatello, where you're continuing to head in the right direction. And it can work within the larger word itself, or as a standalone mark within the P. And then you can start to see how the imagery from that P can start to break apart and be abstracted, so it can be a container for imagery, or the star can be pulled forward as its own unique mark. Again, we're trying to think about flexibility within a system, so you don't just have one logo to work with, but you have a whole kit of parts. And on a vehicle, and on a business card. And then a quick note about color. Of course, colors vary from screen to screen, so take each of these with a grain of salt. But we had a lot of good discussions about where we wanted to push color. Do we want to match the colors from the flag verbatim? Do we want to expand it? And we tried a lot of variations of all of those things. So we looked at all of those things in our directions. And what came out was, as we were talking with staff and looking back at our notes from the community, people really wanted to see their landscape that they knew come forward, not only just the visual representation, but also in colors. So we're like, how can we bring some of the more earthy tones that you might find as you're looking out your window, pair those with some more vibrant tones that bring that confidence and start to play off of the vibrancy from the flag without completely mimicking the flag color. So there's a complementarity between the two. And so that's where we push this color palette. So here are all those three directions together. I will come back to this in a second so we can look at them all together. But the last thing we want to talk about is the tagline options. So we have two of those, the one and only, and home is all around you. The idea around the one and only is that there is no other city that is named Pocatello in the world. And that's a pretty special thing. Not a lot of places can say that. And so there is something that's unique about that. And we also heard when we were here that you're just a little bit unique from everywhere else in Idaho. You don't quite fit in with Idaho's ethos about this or that or this over here. You sort of stick out just in a little way here and there. And I think that speaks really endearingly to what makes you unique. And so leaning into that, saying, yes, we are the one and only. We are a little different, and we're proud of that, really speaks to the strength of this tagline. Home is all around you is a nod to that landscape and the mountains that hold the city. That it's one of the major draws of why people are here. They love those mountains. You love what you can do in them. You love the quiet you can have in them. You love the adventure that you find there. And that is really, when you look at Pocatello, yes, it's the city and the community, but it's also this thing that is around you, that's holding you. That's what draws people here. And it also references on a more abstract level that people are coming here for other things like a job or for school or for a spouse. We heard a lot of people say, I moved to Pocatello for these things. So that home becomes this system of things that are linking around you and bringing you here and saying, yes, I want to stay here because I have all of these connections. And along with these, we have also been exploring the tone of voice that we would recommend that you take when you're sort of expressing who Pocatello is, what the community is about. I'm not going to read this for the sake of time, but if you have any questions about it, we're happy to go into it. But that is really where we're at now. We have these three visual directions, we have these two taglines, and we are at the point where we need to narrow it down. We need to choose which one we're going to go with before we start to really build out that brand system. So at this point, we're happy to answer any questions or any comments that you have.
Questions? Corey?
So I've heard quite a bit about input from staff. How did the input from community members go? Do you have any numbers on that specifically? How many community members you talked to? Approximate, anyway.
Yeah.
'Cause I mean, there's a lot of people.
Wow, approximately. Well, I mean, at Brewfest alone, I think we probably engaged 80 or 90 people, but I would say we probably all told talked to 200 or 300 people. It was all very opt-in. You know, we had events at the library, so people were coming in and we just kind of pulled them into the room and engaged. So it was varying lengths, but yeah, probably 200 to 300, would be my guesstimate.
So these three concepts here, have they been presented to the community outside of this forum here to where people are like, we lean more this way or that way, or how does that look? Here comes Ann.
Council, Ann Nichols, Chief of Staff. And to answer your question, Councilman, no, this has not been presented to the community, mostly because this is the city's company logo. And so we need to present it to you, but we wanted to have the logo for our company designed with input from the community, which is why Hub came here in March and did all of the meetings with all of the people. We wanted to hear from them what makes Pocatello in their opinion, but then when it comes down to choosing our company logo, we're leaving that to you.
I appreciate that.
Questions? I know y'all got questions. This is
Comment.
comments, maybe questions, comments. Did you have one? Yeah. Okay, we'll go with Councilmember Paulson and then Council President Lyric.
So is there any way, so I really loved with Direction 1, the different departments, how those were kind of stylized.
Yes.
If a different one is, I mean, that was my favorite part, honestly. Like, is there any way for interpretations, like maybe an aspect of 3 could be put into 2, or does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's always the possibility for doing something like that. I think where we usually come from is what's missing in the direction that you saw. You know, so if it is that customization, finding a way to make further customization in direction 3, if that's the way that we go, yes, we can play with that. So in each direction, we've tried to play with the different visual elements to give that unique identity. Color is being used in direction 3 in a different way, and that's kind of what we were coming up with. But if that's the driver, then yeah, there's always a little bit of wiggle room there. But what we don't want to do is like take part of 1 and shove it into 3, or, you know.
Okay, and then I had Council President.
And I was wondering the car for direction 2. I was looking down and I missed that one.
Oh, yeah. And it's important to note, all of these are initial studies too.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But yes.
I just wanted to see how that one
Yeah.
was visualized. Personally, the visual aspects of option 2 is where I'm leaning. I particularly like on that option the way that it can be applied to the departments and the different options of filling that O. And then with the tagline, I'm leaning to home is all around you. And I think it works very nicely with that option. I like the visuals of it, but then it also it feels more in my mind about like what we are as a community. I like the one and only, and I like the, you know, that we're unique. But I was, and maybe this is sort of what I think Hayden was suggesting. I can't remember who said what, but almost merging that idea of uniqueness into home is all around you. I like home is all around you because it very much gets at what people love about our community, you know, the mountains around us, literally. And that kind of, people love the outdoors, they love what they're able to do here and the lifestyle they're able to live. So that feels like it says more about who we are and what people love. The one and only could mean a lot of different things. And so it's not always clear, maybe it won't be always clear what exactly that is saying. It could also, I mean, everything could be, but that one has the ability to be used facetiously. But I think if there's a way to kind of merge the idea, the playful idea of Pocatello's uniqueness into that being part of the home being around us, that we're not sort of truly picking one or the other, that we're bringing them together in a way. I really appreciate the work that you did and the feedback that you've gotten, and I think it confirms a lot of what we learned from the comp plan process and what it is that's important to people here, and I think you've captured that, and now it's a matter of just kind of narrowing these things down. I'm a very visual person, and I actually used to do logo design, so I'm looking at visually what I prefer and how it would be applied to the departments and the vehicles and those kinds of things, and that's where option 2 seems very clean and flexible, and yeah, but thank you for all of this. It's exciting.
Councilmember Mansfield.
I like Council President Lyric, prefer direction 2. Couple of reasons. Number one, I think it does the best emphasis on the name of Pocatello as opposed to just the individual P, which the other two kind of pull out and highlight. And while that is important, I prefer the emphasis on the entirety of the name and the utilization of the name. When I just kind of let my focus drift a little bit, my attention gets drawn to the P's in the other two styles, whereas my attention is drawn to the name in the second one, and that's something that I prefer. Secondly, I think the utilization of that space in the mountain bike image in particular is excellent, and I would love the idea of like banners on the top of our website highlighting the different things to do in Pocatello with the people in the middle of the O, and I think it fits really well with both of the taglines. And I really enjoy it. The third thing, though, and I think what I like the best about it is the emphasis on the image that is unique to our flag. The compass star is on our flag. It obviously is, but it is one and is a image that can be used elsewhere. Whereas the emphasis on the mountaintop with the compass star is one that I think is very unique to it. It differentiates it, and I've just had opportunities to see our flag. I see more stickers of our flag in businesses. I was behind a police car the other day, and I never realized that they have the black and white image of the flag on the back of their cars. It's becoming an image that I think is permeating Pocatello in a way that I've been really pleased to see. And so I think that we should take advantage of that opportunity and do the same thing at the city level.
So I'm curious, was that the first time you'd been behind a police car or instead of in front of a police car?
I was still in my car, mind you.
Okay. Councilmember Mangum.
Was that on the back seat?
So I wasn't arrested as Councilmember Mansfield was, but I do like everything that he just said about Direction 2. However, I enjoyed Direction 3, just that P as a standalone image itself. Especially when you came to the one and only, where you have the 3 different departments. So you've got Parks and Recreation, Human Resources, and Planning and Development. I like how that P is right there and then those others are underneath. But as an overall theme, number 2, I think is really hones the essence of Pocatello. But for each individual department, having that P and like that little color off to the corner there, I think would be those 2 together really give the essence of Pocatello, and it stands out beautifully. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
Okay, we'll go with Councilmember Nichols, then Councilmember Cheatham.
Yeah, I like direction number 2 and home is all around you tagline.
That's it? That's your comment? that was great comment. Okay, man of few words. You listen when he speaks, though. That's okay. Councilmember Cheatham.
Well, I'm not wowed by any of those three, but of those three, I like direction two best. But I like the one and only. I think it speaks bigger than bigger than the city itself here. And if we're using this logo in business development mailings and so forth, I think it says something that Home is All Around You doesn't say. It speaks more to the uniqueness and differentiates our community better from every other business that might be appealed to in a particular business development situation.
Okay. Okay, we've got, I've got Councilmember Mangum, then Councilmember Mansfield, and then Councilmember Paulson.
I also like the one and only. It speaks, to me, it speaks of pride in our community, in our city, pride in our jobs and our departments, pride in what we do, pride in the city of Pocatello. I do agree with Council President Lyric that it could be turned into more of a facetious term. I made a joke to Josh, and I said somebody would call us the one and only armpit, because that's kind of the thing, you know. But we are the one and only. We have resources that other cities don't have. We have scenery and backdrop and trails that other communities don't have. And so I think the one and only really speaks to who we are and taking pride in who we are, the one and only Pocatello. And like you said, we're the only one in the world. So we take pride in that.
Okay, Josh?
I'm with Councilmember Cheatham and Mangum both on the one and only as well. My reasoning, when I was in college, I spent a lot of time at small universities across the Pacific Northwest and Rocky Mountain West. And I can't tell you a single city logo or city catchphrase tagline except Portland's, which is really taken off, right, of Keep Portland Weird. And it's a uniqueness and one that I think kind of borrows from that in a way that, especially as a college town, I don't think is a bad idea at all.
Okay, Councilmember Paulson.
Yeah, I generally like number two the best. But with the sayings, I'm not fully in love with either, but Home is All Around You feels a little health insurance ad-like to me, no offense. So I do lean towards the one and only. Yeah.
What's wrong with health insurance? We have, Councilmember Cheatham, did you have another comment? No. Anyone else?
I do.
Okay.
I mean, now that you've said that, that's the way I'm gonna hear that. I still like the idea of figuring out how we could put them together. Because I agree with what everybody's saying about the uniqueness. But it's interesting that, Josh, that you brought up Portland's, because yes, it emphasizes the uniqueness, but it emphasizes something specific about why it's unique. That's what I feel is missing here. It says we're the one and only, but why? And that encourages people to kind of fill in the why, and could lead to good things and could lead to comments like you made that I don't want to repeat. So I think somehow bringing them together and making it less insurance ad agency, now that that idea is kind of planted.
I was thinking of retirement center.
So I'm a little confused. You're trying to combine the two taglines?
Yeah.
I think that both taglines are good taglines personally, and as a standalone. And we've got actually Councilmember Nichols. What was yours? What was your opinion on the tagline?
I like Home is All Around.
Home is all around you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but now that Hayden knows me, the insurance.
Sorry.
Well, if we're going by what I'm hearing from up here, I've got 4 of you that have said the one and only, and I've got 2 that have said a home is all around you. And so, unless I hear a big argument to not, let's look at home is all around you, because that's one I like. And we'll go, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Let's pull forward the one and only. And so this will be next week, and so we'll have that as a tagline. Now the 3 logos up there on top, what are we thinking? I could tell you, I've got, most of you are thinking number 2.
I agree with number 2. I'd like to see that in a different font for the Pocatello. I fear that's going to be a blur, a solid block blur. I guess I don't care for the bold typeface. So that concerns me a little bit.
Rick, would you consider like number 1's Pocatello?
I think that stands out better, very frankly, than the boldface on number 2.
I agree.
So we've got a couple that agree with that. Now, I've got one that obviously has an opinion there. My only question, I think, would be on that is the O, where it's the space between. If it's a not as bold font, does that O lose that effectiveness?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's the custom spacing and weight of the letters that allows for that space in between with the O. And so we can look at the spacing of the letters.
Turn them a little bit.
Just kerning and playing with that a little bit, especially when we're using it for certain applications. We can put very strict guidelines around that so it doesn't become a black block or a color block. But it is the weight and positioning that creates that little space that's fun and playful. So.
I think the kerning could make a big difference.
Yeah. And one thing, again, once we get into the nitty-gritty details, is we'll look at size and scale. At what point, as it gets smaller and smaller, like when you put it on a pencil, does it need to be this, or do we need to adjust it a little bit so that you can still make it legible? And that's one thing we would consider for all 3 of these, whichever direction we would go.
Okay, I've got,
Nope, good.
no, I no longer have Josh. We've lost him. I've got Council President Lurick and then Councilmember Nichols.
I guess I see it a little bit differently, but visually, the heaviness of it and the thickness of that typeface are what make that work to me. And especially where you're filling in that O, and I think it needs to be bold. If it switched to, for example, the Pocatello of number 1, I just don't feel that it would work in the way that it is. And personally, I like the tightness of it too. I understand what you're saying about, you need to look at it at every size. Like if you were to put that on a pencil, does it just, become a block that's too tight? But I think it really emphasizes the word Pocatello and our name, which was one of the things that, was it Josh that mentioned, rather than just focusing on the P, that it puts the emphasis on the Pocatello. But I think it's that, those sort of fat, tight letters that make it work the way that it is. So I wouldn't want to see that reduced too much or spread out too much.
Okay, Councilmember Nichols.
I agree with Linda. The boldness of number 2 is part of what I really liked about it, particularly being able to have that spot in the middle of the O for so many different uses.
Other comments?
One last one. That is really what strikes me as why number 2 why number 2 strikes me so much. The way that it holds together in a way that the other 2 don't as much. At different sizes and everything, I worry, especially with number 1, that those lines built in around the P into that block might not always read very well. It doesn't sort of hold together as well. It's not as tight and as clear. And 3, same issue, maybe less so. But it's not just bold, it's really tight and clear. So I like that.
Okay, well, I'm just going to tell you what I think. Okay. Then I'll tell you what I have here. I like number 1. I think it's unique. I think I really like that P and the different designs that you can put on there. I think that's a cool one. I recognize we're not going to end up going with number 1, and so I just wanted to express my opinion there, quite frankly. I like it. I think it's a good one. And we're going to walk away from one. I also do agree with Rick on the bold letters. That was one that's always held me back from number 2, but I see why the bold letters are important. And so I'm happy, honestly, with all 3 of them. I think all 3 of them are great designs and are great logos and stuff. I can sit here and you can nitpick all of them, but what I'm getting right now from everybody, unless there's a big change, is I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 5 of the 6 that say they like number 2, and I think the 6th one said, yeah, I kind of like number 2 too, and stuff. I'm probably the only one that really doesn't love number 2. I love 1, but number 2 I love now if that's where we're going. So I love it. I think it's a good number, a good pick. So what I'm seeing for direction moving forward is number 2, the space between is what the council is likes the best, and the one and only as the tagline. And so unless I hear differently in the next 3 seconds, I'm gonna recommend that you bring that one forward next week as it's presented here, and we'll go from there. I don't know, you might look at that spacing or the boldness of that, but it sounds like the boldness is what pulls
You know,
everybody together.
some fonts have a semi-bold characterization, and I don't know if that will work here or if it's just a kerning issue. But I worry about the reproductive ability. We start putting this on pens and stationery and business cards and police cars and fire trucks and all the other things that we're going to be doing with this. I worry that especially that E, it's going to become a square. It's not going to have the legs on it, and the triangle in the middle of the A will just disappear. That's what has me concerned.
Okay. Mr. Mayor. Yeah. Josh? And then Corey.
The one thing I look at, like when I look at the page here that's got the city of Pocatello with the logos, it looks like they already have kind of spaced that out in a less bold font for utilization, and in a little bit more like practical, tangible when we're reprinting it, not just on the centralized logo. And so I think there are opportunities to work with that. And this page seriously is like, of all these, all the pages have lots of great work, but I look at this one in particular, the one that's on the screen, and like, I would wear that T-shirt. I would love to have that on a business card. I thought the car looked amazing. I love this logo. Like, I would wear a hat with this. And that's why at the end of the day that I picked number 2, because that's the one that I'm like, I would wear this, and I love that. I also want to give a big thanks to you guys for your work, and for the staff committee for all of their work as well. I know that there was a lot of time and effort that went into this, and for all the staff and their input as well. So big thank you to the many hours that were put into this project.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Councilmember Mangum?
I was going to say what he said.
That sounds good. Anybody else, other comments? And then we're going to wrap this up. Okay, we're coming with number 2 with the tagline, the one and only. And council, that'll be in front of you next week to consider what it looks like. So thank you for your work. This has been great, and you even extended your contract, so thank you for doing that, because we couldn't make our mind up to start with, and so
I think being
this is great. So thank you. You've done a great job.
And thank you.
Thank you very much.
Was that on there?
Fun.
That would never come off my head.
Okay, council, we've been here a couple hours. I'm going to recommend, well, I'm not even recommending, I'm going to say we're going to take a break for a few minutes, and then we'll come back to have this sign code discussion.
Absolutely.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us after our meeting, or after our break. We'll go ahead and continue our meeting with the sign code updates. Planning and Development Services staff members will be present to receive council feedback and direction regarding a proposed repeal of Title 15.20, sign code and amendments to Title 17, zoning regulations. Council received public comments during a public hearing held at September 5, 2024 regular council meeting. Good morning.
Morning.
So Mayor, Brent McLean, Planning Development Services Director, I have Jen Flynn with us as well, who's the City Assistant Planner. We had the sign code at the last City Council meeting, and you had moved this discussion to this work session to be able to provide opportunity for the council to discuss. We did receive one comment since that meeting, and Jen can give a brief synopsis of what that comment entailed, just to let you know. But other than that, we're just here to take your guidance and direction and go from there.
Okay, council, I might remind you, public hearing was over. I did say that if you had any questions, concerns, anything, to contact city staff, not the council, and so one person has done that, and so we'll see what happened there. I'm not suggesting you put it as, the weight into it necessarily, but I'm not saying ignore it, and so.
Yeah, I just really want to share, anything and everything that the public has to say about what we're trying to do with sign code. Yesterday, a sign contractor came and visited me, and she had kind of two main points. One was that the way we're going about regulating window signs in our proposed code oftentimes hurts sign contractors. And she just provided examples that, in our proposed sign code, we're advocating that window signs can cover 50% of window area on each elevation. And because of that, a lot of businesses want their entire windows covered with just this kind of perforated vinyl covering. And because they try to follow the rules, then they lose business by not providing that window signage.
Jen, that's the current code that we're under right now.
Well, so window signage is regulated under current and proposed. So the current signage says 50% of each window area. And through kind of understanding the history of what's gone into the window signage rules, in the past, I've understood that it's a safety aspect, that like police wanted to be able to see into windows. And so we were, in code, we backed that up by saying you can only cover 50% of each window. In the proposed code, we listened to what businesses were asking for, and they say, hey, if we want to cover all of our windows, we should be able to do that. And so in going along both with planning practices that suggest that it's more business friendly and customer friendly to be able to see into a business, that they would be able to cover 50% of any windows on that elevation. So just for example, if there's 4 windows on an elevation, they can completely cover 2 windows and then they could leave the other 2 windows open. Or they can cover 50% of those 4 windows and then leave the other part visible, just so that I think it has a cleaner appearance and you're able to see into the business.
So basically, what we kind of talked about is that the issues that were raised by the sign contractor are a code enforcement issue. So it's really our job to be more concerted in our efforts of following up on that code enforcement issues and notifying businesses that have 100% window coverage that goes against the sign code. And so that's something that we plan to do, in our time that's available to kind of chase that down. And you do get into a very gray area about displays versus signage. A display such as a mural, according to code, is defined as something that does not have an advertisement for the business. And so there's a lot of gray area that we have to think through and try to be practical in our approach of how we're going to enforce, what we're putting into place and what's already in place.
Okay, council.
Just one comment that I remember the person you're talking about actually came and testified.
She did.
Okay. I just want to be clear that we're talking the same person.
Yep.
But she sort of clarified and gave examples
Yep.
to you? Okay.
Exactly.
But to Jen's point, it truly is more of her complaints were more of a code enforcement
Right.
issue than it was a code issue.
Yeah.
And we don't drive around looking for code enforcement complaints with signage. We just don't have staff time to do that.
Okay. Council, as you know, that they offered two different options. I think that there's a third option, maybe a fourth option, but what we're really looking at is direction. From here, we did hear from the sign companies. We heard from a few in the public. And so we're looking for some direction
Mr. Mayor.
on where we go. Yes, Rick and then Hayden.
I'm a little intimidated by the idea of looking at a 173-page document in one big bite. And to me, there's several issues here, and I agree that our sign code probably needs to be updated. Hasn't been done in a very long time, comprehensively, but I'm not sure that what is being proposed, it has some good pieces in it, and it has some parts I really don't like. And I hate to take it all in one lump sum. I would rather see us take the different pieces that are under consideration and break them down so we can take this thing one bite at a time. And rather than repeal the existing code, we can amend the code a piece at a time and accomplish some good things. The billboard issue, when some of our major employers in this community and potential major employers use those billboards very heavily. I'm talking about Idaho Central, our hospital, the university, Health West. They use those billboards heavily to display new products, new services that they're offering, and they're a tool. I was in Coeur d'Alene last week, and we decided on Thursday morning to go to breakfast before activity started. I had to drive all the way to Hayden before I could find a pole sign that told me where a restaurant was, because Coeur d'Alene doesn't have them. I must have driven by a dozen, but I went, we missed that turn. We're off to the next one, because there was no signage except on the building face. We got the Hayden, there's signs everywhere. We found a nice place to go in and have breakfast, and so that concerns me a bit. And I think the big sky movement, or the dark sky movement, I think there's a lot of issues besides billboards and electronic billboards and turning things off at 10 o'clock at night that affect that dark sky issue. We've got almost 20,000 utility hookups in our community, and every one of those contributes light to the nighttime sky. And I think that's another issue. I've talked to a lot of people over the course of the last couple of weeks on this, and I am very concerned if we pass what I think this says, and I'll have to admit, reading it has been a struggle for me to comprehend all 173 pages. I'm very concerned about the message we send to future developers in our community. We all complain about the lack of retail, and I'm concerned about the message we will send to people who might want to bring a business to our community on a big scale, and how people are going to find the directional use of billboards, for example, or off-premise signage, I think is really important to those businesses. And they have a way they do business. They will not adapt themselves to the way we do business here. They'll go somewhere else. So that's my concern. I would rather not see a wholesale repeal of this statute. I'd rather see, let's take this thing a piece at a time and let's update it.
Okay, Councilmember Paulson and then Council President Lyric.
So I guess piece by piece here, I definitely think there needs to be an EMC curfew. Strongly, I think that needs to happen, and a cap on the billboards. But then one thing I did want to say to everyone, last week, I thought it was very insulting when they used a hypothetical suicidal child to say that we shouldn't have an EMC curfew. So I just thought that was ridiculous. I wanted to say that.
Okay. Council President Lyric.
Before I get into, where I'm leaning on this, I just wanted to address a couple of the points that Councilmember Cheatham said. You started by saying that the sign code hasn't been revised in a long time or something, but yeah, I mean, that we haven't like rewritten it. But since you and I have been on here, we've revised it numerous times and gone through that process. And to me, that is a kind of piecemeal, looking at pieces and parts of it and not doing, a wholesale rewrite. And those times have not gone really well. I think it's time that we do actually look at the whole thing. And I agree, it's long and it's complicated and everything, but when we look at where we're actually making the revisions, then I think that becomes more manageable. Not every single thing in it is being changed. But it concerns me to not at some point do the holistic thing and just look at the entire code and try to come up with something. And I feel like that would be the way to stop having this come up every year, every 2 years. I think we can just continue going down that road forever. I would like to take the whole thing and look at it and try to come up with something that could at least, be in place for maybe 5 years or 10 or something, that we don't have to keep dealing with this. I think when we just take pieces at a time that we run into that problem. I also think that the idea that businesses won't come here if we cap billboards, I guess I look at that differently. I think everybody adapts, and technology changes, the way we do things changes, and people adapt to that. I know a lot of us, when we're out driving on the highway, for example, if we're, on a trip, maybe a billboard catches your eye, but a lot of us have those devices in our hands where we're just Googling what's near us. And we figure out where to get gas or where to go to the restaurant. So as things change, I think we all have to adapt, including businesses and how they do business. But for those large businesses that you mentioned, or not necessarily large, any business right now that is using billboards, we are not getting rid of all of our billboards overnight. I am in favor of capping them because I don't want to see new areas of development like Northgate or some other new development just become like another Yellowstone. I think going forward, we can start kind of shifting how we do things in order to, at some point, get more to the aesthetic that we want. If we open up new areas to billboards, they're just gonna go up like they have everywhere else. So I am in favor of that cap, and I think that it's still, we have plenty of billboards in town for those people that still want to advertise on billboards. ISU was another large organization or institution that we heard from that uses billboards because their competitors, counterparts, whatever you want to call them, U of I, Boise, they advertise on billboards. And I've seen ISU billboards all over the state, and that does get it out there and it's visible and everything, but I think those are there for them. There's enough billboards out there for the people that really need to do that. But I do think eventually they're going to find other methods, and we're going to shift away from some of what we use today anyway. So those are just some of the thoughts that I had, regarding what you were talking about, Rick. In looking at the whole thing and in hearing the testimony that we heard, and a lot of the people that come to the hearing are sign business people. So that was, sort of the louder voice in the public hearing. But we all talk to people in the community, and I have been ever since I've been on the council. And one of the topics I hear the most about is signs. And the types of signs I hear the most about that people aren't crazy about are billboards and EMCs, electronic messaging centers. I struggle with the curfew idea for a couple of reasons. That might be one where I would be more open to looking at whether we need to do a curfew or not. There are a lot of businesses that currently have EMCs on their business, and we need to look at whether we need to make them shut them off. I personally don't care for them at night, but I've also had citizens say to me, and we'd never go completely dark, because we have street lights and we have businesses that are open late, so their signs would be allowed to be on under the new code. But the idea that if you drive around at night and it's, almost black, like there's nothing on, that it sort of makes us look like we're not alive, that light kind of gives life to the look of the place. So that's an interesting idea, and I did hear that from a couple of people, that they sort of like some lights, even when there's not a lot of people out, or if you drive around at night, that we're not just dead. So there's that. There's also fairness to the business owners, and I would like us to figure out how to have electronic signs or EMCs not be so bright.
We have that in common.
We do. And again, that might be mostly an enforcement issue, and I know it's a difficult enforcement issue. The curfew might end up being a difficult enforcement issue. It's just, I guess what I'm saying is that's the part that I maybe would be more flexible on, or would be open to considering. The cap is something I feel really strongly about. So my position right now is version 2 with a cap, as I do not want to open the door to adding more billboards into newly developed areas, as we're, the plan was to try to keep those cleaner and get away from that Las Vegas-y kind of look. So I'd like us to go ahead with the whole revision. I prefer version 2. I prefer the cap. I would like the curfew, but I would consider maybe not doing that.
Okay, Councilmember Mangum.
Yeah. So I agree partially with Councilmember Cheatham. This is a lot to undertake at one time. However, though, I do feel that taking it piece by piece, it keeps getting represented over and over and over. And at some point, we have to draw a line and say we're done revisiting this every single year. So I do not like the idea of the curfew because we've only singled out the EMCs, but we're not looking at any other signs that are lit also. And so I don't think that it's good to do that curfew. I think we just scratch that. The cap, I don't necessarily mind the cap. Actually, I agree with the cap. I don't want us to look like Las Vegas or Los Angeles or just have billboards all over. Currently, it looks like the majority of them are in commercial areas or retail areas. So with that, they're serving their purpose in their specific areas. We have two different versions here. Each version has its own merits that are really good, and then both of them have areas where it's like I'm not really a fan of it. But running a business, running the bank, I feel like signage is really important to us, especially when we're trying to stand out against other businesses and other competition. Managing the bank within our region, we have more bank competition than any other areas within the state. And so it's really important for us to be able to get our signage out there and everything. And so I think that we have to look at that from that perspective. Also, with the window signs, I don't mind the idea of 50%, but I also am more in favor of let me paint my sign or paint my windows. Christmas time comes around, you've got people who want to deck out their windows with all kinds of Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and all this. If I've got 6 signs and I have to go or 6 windows and I have to go every other window, you break up the whole image of the Christmas theme or whatever it is that I'm trying to present on my windows. Mm-hmm. And so I would prefer it just let the windows be the windows, Now signs, we can enforce some certain things there, but let the businesses maintain their windows. Obviously, no obscene paintings or murals or anything like that, obscene gestures or anything on the windows. But outside of that, though, let me throw Mickey Mouse and Donald on my window. Sorry, go.
Mayor, just to make quick clarification on that, holiday decorations and murals are not regulated by the sign code. And so if someone wanted to do that to their windows, there's nothing in the code that would regulate that. This is only strictly speaking about advertising the business. Yeah.
So welcome back Orange and Black comes around. I want to go all ISU on all 13 of my windows. Does that count as a holiday or does that count as advertising?
That's
because
a good question.
Technically advertising ISU. So how do we differentiate between the two?
And that is the struggle with sign code, because technically we can't, we're not regulating the holiday stuff, but we also have to be very careful about are we regulating based off of message? But we can regulate off of on-premise or off-premise. That's the only thing we can really regulate. But if someone's sharing a political message or whatever it is, we don't regulate that. And so that is there's always those really gray areas. And maybe, for Pocatello, welcome back Orange and Black, that is a holiday, where it's an event within the city. And that's something that we would have to make a determination on in those specific instances.
So there then, we are creating more gray area when it comes to the window signs.
Well, but the window signage is, all we're saying is 50% of your windows. So if you have lots of windows and you wanted to paint or put signage in a large chunk of them and cover the whole thing, as long as it's 50%, you can do it. And so we actually made our sign, the proposed sign code is looser than our current sign code when it comes to window signage, and providing more opportunities for businesses to do window signage.
Okay, Councilmember Mansfield.
When I think about advertising, I think it's a very complex issue because of the intersection on the First Amendment. And even there in your answer, the discussion of how do we, regulate signage without regulating content becomes a very difficult question that I think is plagued cities. But on principle, I believe that this is regulation that we as the city ought to see as our biggest burden and one that only we can undertake. On my 3 years on the council, I've seen multiple instances where we've had business owners come to appeal, where they've put signage up without proper knowledge of the code, and then the sign companies told them to come and ask for appeals, and we find ourselves in a difficult bind between a sign company that didn't properly inform them, as is their obligation, and a small business who spent tens of thousands of dollars on signage that we then had to try and prioritize code versus the wellness of that business. There's also the case of the billboard at the bottom of Olympus, where we said this was a right-of-way, it wasn't a road. And when asked about what the potential implications were if we considered that a road, I was told that that could greatly expand the number of opportunities where billboards could go in, which the courts did rule was allowed. We immediately got emails from residents in that area who said that they find that light directly into their front windows who live along that road on Pocatello Creek Road. I think I'm in favor of the moratorium on billboards, the curfew on EMC messaging. I think we are inundated with advertisements, always. And I think there are opportunities for businesses to do so, and it's going to continue to expand, and it's going to continue to get even more intrusive. I know of a car dealership, because most times when you go to a car dealership, you'll look at the prices, and then you'll go around and you see what other offers are available. They used online digital advertising where they did geolocation, so when you pulled into the parking lot of their competitors, your phone flagged and gave you an advertisement for this other car dealership so that you went and looked at them as well. We as the city have an opportunity to create a city that prioritizes the scenery and the well-being of people. Andrew Oswald is a researcher for the University of Warwick who did what is considered the most comprehensive study on advertising and its impact on citizenry. He evaluated 27 European countries with 900,000 citizen satisfaction and happiness data from 1980 to 2011. He found then, after tracking the annual advertising spending in those nations over the same period, that when you control for the variety of factors, including things like employment, disease and health, and other factors, that an increase in advertising resulted and contributed to a direct correlation and decrease in overall happiness and satisfaction within the next 2 to 3 years in those countries. We are constantly bombarded by signs, and I don't think that we need to have our scenery and all of the lights do so as well. And so for me, especially on the side of billboards, businesses need to have signs to identify where they're at. That's important, and I understand that, and I think there's some good parts in here. I'm all in favor of a moratorium on billboards. I think we give our scenery back to our citizens, and we look out for them who have written in and spoken of on this matter particularly.
Councilmember Nichols.
Sure, so there's a lot that I really like in the new version. I like the fact that it's simplified and streamlined, and in many instances can give additional signing opportunities for businesses. I think some of the examples you had, like on the Pain and Spine Center, was just excellent. I'm still really struggling with this curfew, and I'd like to understand maybe how big of a problem is it? And we talked about this a little bit during the public hearing, but I mean, are we getting a lot of complaints or a few complaints, or can you give me an idea of the magnitude of the issue?
So lots of times the complaints we get are not official complaints that someone writes in. We do get some of those, but a lot of times what we get is comments, and people call in and just make a complaint, but they don't make a formalized complaint. I think the brightness of the EMCs and is the thing that we hear the most about when it comes to signage complaints. We do get other lighting complaints as well on buildings and street lights and things like that, or parking lot lights. But we have code in place to deal with that they're supposed to be shielded and they're supposed to direct down on the property. The signage, the EMCs are supposed to turn down the brightness of those, and they don't always do that. Lots of times the businesses, that they don't understand those rules and regulations, and you get a new manager in a store and they crank it up, and so we are constantly having to call people and say, hey, we got a complaint that your sign is too bright, we need you to turn it down. And sometimes they turn it down, and sometimes it takes us a long time to get them to turn it down. But the ability for us to then go and actually measure the brightness of that sign is very difficult, because we have to get right in front of it, and they're typically really high. And so for us to get up there requires, one, after hours activities, and two, we have to arrange with someone who has a vehicle that has a boom lift that we can get into and get up there and actually measure it. And so the enforcement of that is really difficult. It's really easy to see if a sign is turned on or off after a curfew. You can just drive by and look at it.
So if all of the EMCs were in compliance with the code for brightness, would we have a problem?
Probably not.
So it's really a compliance issue of people
It is a
jacking them
very,
up?
very much a compliance issue. And so with the curfew, what that does, it makes the compliance easy. It makes it easy for us to enforce. And we tried to push that time back as late as possible. A lot of people aren't happy with the time that we selected. They think it should be sooner because they go to bed sooner. But we felt like, the 11 o'clock hour is a time when the traffic starts to slow down. You don't see people out on the streets. The signage isn't as important because you don't have people traveling. The numbers of people on the streets at that hour is so low that the impact of that curfew is very minimal at that point.
And it's important to remember that it's during business hours. And so if a business is open from 6 a.m. till midnight, they're welcome to keep their EMC on during those, during those hours.
All right, so President Lyric and then Councilmember Cheatham.
I wanted to just emphasize one of the things, and Councilmember Nichols mentioned this, but one of the things I really like about the new code is, well, I like the simplification and kind of streamlining and making it more user-friendly so people have a much more clear idea of what they are and aren't allowed to do. That's been difficult in the past. But the other part of it that I think is really good, that somehow seems to have gotten lost in all the focus on billboards or off-premise signs, but for on-premise signs, you've greatly increased, or maybe not greatly, you've increased the options for business owners, size and type and various different things. So I think that's going in the right direction to give people more options. And we talked, we were asking questions in the hearing, after the hearing the other night, and one of the people testifying mentioned, you're focusing on or the code is focusing on new buildings and what happens with old buildings. And basically, if you, and by old, I'm assuming we mean existing, not necessarily that they're old, but if you own an existing building and you have signage on it, you were saying that a lot of those people are going to want to get new signs because they can make them bigger and have more of them and things like that. So if they choose to stay with what they've got, that's fine, and they won't have to change it, but many of them might want to. So I really want to emphasize that on-premise signage now has more options for business owners. So I think that's an important thing. The other issue, and you mentioned this, Brent, how we have, there was a comment that said, why do we only regulate signs in terms of lighting? If they're electronic or digital or, EMCs, why do we only regulate that lighting problem with signs? But we don't. We have, it's not in sign code, but we have other parts of the code to regulate lighting. That person mentioned the temple being lit at night and, why, and other businesses as well. And why do we not regulate those? But we do, right? We have other parts of the code. And then I had a question about the curfew. I had made a note that night that the curfew only applied to EMCs. And so I wonder about the problem of that, because some of the complaints, and I'm looking at that picture right there, but some of the complaints about lighted signs have been billboards, and that's shining into my window. Is that going to be a problem that we only are going to demand certain signs be dimmed and not others?
Yeah. So the code that was first taken to the P&Z included all signs in the curfew. And based off of the feedback that we heard from the P&Z and from the testimonies that we received in the P&Z meeting, we scaled that back just to the EMCs that we brought forward to you. And so we felt like, okay, we're listening to the businesses. They don't want to be forced to turn off all their signage, and I understand that, and I can appreciate that. A cabinet sign, that doesn't add a lot of light to the overall scheme of things. Those aren't the things we're receiving complaints on. A billboard, most of the complaints we get, even with billboards, it's not the static billboard with a light shining onto the static sign. It's the EMC billboards that we're getting complaints on, because they change images, and so the lighting changes on them, and so they're noticeable, and they just naturally, because of the change of the images, some images are brighter than others. If they have a white background, it's going to be brighter than if it had a darker background. So that's a lot of what people are noticing, is that there's these fluctuations of light. And so the EMCs are what we're receiving complaints about. It's not the static signs. And so that's why we're like, okay, what are we really trying to achieve? We're trying to address the issues that we're receiving complaints over and that people are really unhappy about, and that is the electronic message center, whether it's a billboard or whether it's on someone's pole sign or on their building. Those are the things that people are complaining about. And those are the things that we're dealing with as staff for code enforcement. And so for me, that is a way to judge where we have issues that we need to address, is what kind of complaints are we getting? And it's primarily around the EMCs.
And you said, I think you were proposing if we went with a curfew, a delay in the implementation of that curfew. Was the recommendation a year?
Yeah, we recommended a year. We're open to whatever you would like, but we just felt like that gives the businesses an opportunity to comply, gives them some time, because some of those signs may need some alterations. Most of them will probably be able to comply immediately, but some of those older signs might need some sort of switch or something in there to help regulate them. Our current code requires the capability of dimming already. And so anything that has been established or installed within the current code should be able to comply immediately.
But we'd add that. I did have just one last point that I wanted to make that was kind of troubling to me from a lot of the emails that we received and also the testimony that we received. First of all, if we support revising the whole sign code and either of the drafts we've come up with, that somehow we're anti-business. And I don't think anyone up here is anti-business. We are trying to be as business-friendly as possible and not limit them in their ability to advertise, because advertising is important for businesses. And so I think, we need to balance that with everyone else in the community and their needs and desires and everything. And so predominantly, as I said, in the hearing, we were hearing from sign businesses and maybe some other businesses who, want to not be limited in any way in their ability to advertise. I think it's a little more complicated than that, because everybody who lives in this city is a stakeholder. It's not just about businesses and sign businesses or others, but we all have a stake in this. And it just seems like that kind of gets ignored in the testimony. We hear one side of things, and I think, and you mentioned the other night in the hearing, Brent, and this to me was one of the most important things that I know I'm trying to do, and I think we're all trying to do, is figure out what the balance is. It's not all one way or all the other way. And I've heard for many years, and I heard again just this past weekend, completely unsolicited. It wasn't even, she didn't even know we'd had a hearing on that or that we were even revising it, but a comment about a particular sign, and it wasn't like, can you guys do anything? It was just venting about, and it's a newer sign, and she said how much she hates it because she can see it from 3 miles away, and it's just this big lighted thing. And so it's something we hear about all the time. So all our citizens, or many of them, have opinions on this. And I think their opinions count too. And even if that's running into somebody in a grocery store and hearing a comment, I'm including that in weighing all of this, because it is about balancing all the different stakeholders and all the different interests. And we all have an interest. But we are also trying to help businesses and be fair to businesses. We just have to balance that with how many of our people feel about the aesthetics of it all. And even comments about how they might, whether they look at those signs or not, how they find businesses to shop at. And I'm hearing more and more people are using different methods and Googling things and getting recommendations for things. So we all have to kind of adjust as that changes. But I just wanted to make the point that there are a lot of stakeholders. Everybody is a stakeholder who lives here. So I think we need to consider that.
Okay, Councilmember Cheatham.
Well, my involvement in this issue goes back to 2017. I started attending council meetings about 6 months before that November election. And that was a hot topic throughout that campaign season. And frankly, it's one of the issues I ran on during that. It was a big deal. Following the election, the council decided they would take a motion I made. We took a field trip. We loaded on a transit bus and we went to a number of locations and we looked at the electronic signs and the billboards and all that. And one of the billboard owners had a light device. He could measure the ambient light and he could measure the light produced by the sign. And we ended up adopting a code that followed the National Sign People's recommendation. I believe it's half a lumen above ambient light, if I remember right. But nobody's following that. And that's where, the attorney for Association of Idaho Cities, one of the first meetings I was at, said, if you're not going to enforce an ordinance, don't pass it. And we're not doing a good job because you don't have the people to go around and measure those every night. My biggest complaint is Highland High School. That light, when you pull up to that stoplight at 9 o'clock at night, you cannot see the light because they won't turn it down. And I've complained. I must have talked to Bart when he was at the school district 20 times. And he finally told the principal up there, if you don't keep it turned down, I'm going to shut it off. And now that he's gone, it's back up again. An illuminated sign at a half a lumen above ambient will not cast a shadow. You can't make it cast a shadow, and it's not obtrusive and doesn't shine in people's windows. We've got an ordinance in place that our existing owners of those signs, or those who have the controls, are not following. And that, I think, is our real problem here, whether it's a billboard, a message center, whatever it is. Animation is creeping back into our signs. The ordinance included eliminating animation, and it's back on our signs all over the place again. And that is distracting to drivers. I am very concerned about the idea that we do everything on Google while we're driving. Bannock Transportation, we had a meeting earlier this week and noted in the plans that our fatality rate and accident rate in this community is climbing. And I think that's a big piece of it. And if we're going to encourage people to use their phones while they're driving so they can find businesses or get directions, I think we're creating a real potential problem within our community that's going to cost us lives. I don't know where this is going to go. I suspect I'll be a minority vote here. But I think before we crank down further on billboards and illumination, we need to figure out a way to enforce what we have. This community is about 33 square miles. And if there are roughly, I think on the map it said 80 signs within our city limits, and there are almost 300 miles of streets, that doesn't seem like a lot to me. And most of those signs are in commercial areas. They're not in residential areas. One of the big complaints 6.5 years ago was the ISU sign they put up next to the mini dome. You can see that clear across the valley. And we cannot control that sign because it is not on any property that we can zone or have any action on. I think we have to be very careful with what we do here in creating an ordinance that is going to be business restrictive and that we can enforce. And parts of this I really like. I really do. But I think overall, one or two, I think we've got a problem. And I think as this city continues to grow, which I certainly hope it does, there are going to be places that additional billboards would be useful for our business community. End of rant.
Okay, I've got a couple others that want to say something, but I've got a question for our attorney, Jared. Because what I've heard a number of times is curfew and no curfew, yeah, absolutely a curfew and stuff on these EMCs. My question is a legal concern. I won't tip my hat if I think we should have them or have it or not. What kind of legal challenges do you foresee if we focus on the EMCs and not any of the other signs? The static signs, even though we haven't had complaints about the static signs, I get that. We have had complaints about the EMCs, but what kind of legal challenges do you see by segregating the EMCs out of all of the other signs and putting a curfew there? Is there a challenge? Is there not a challenge?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Jared Johnson, City Attorney. As I stated in the meeting last week, I believe both versions that are before you and most of the issues that you've discussed here today and last week are defensible, legally speaking. However, I like to look at what's most easily defensible or what's least likely to give us a legal challenge. And to the mayor's question, the legal argument that would come, the legal challenge that would come to regulating or putting a curfew on just EMCs would basically be most likely in the form of a takings analysis, an economic takings by them not being able to advertise for a third of the day, which is what 8 hours would be, 11 to 7. And part of that takings analysis or taking argument that they would present would be disparity of treatment. So you're treating electronic message centers differently than other similarly situated forms of advertisement. And that would, my guess, be the legal argument that they would present. Whether that would prevail or not, you never know. It's always a possibility. That's the part that, in my legal opinion, does cause me the most hesitation, is that disparity of treatment. As Brent mentioned, the Planning and Zoning Commission took back the curfew on all signs, all lighted signs, and just went to EMCs for your consideration. Now, I'm not suggesting a curfew of all signs either, because I think that enhances the possibility of a legal challenge, because now you've taken away all signs for a third of the day. However, that disparity of treatment in the takings analysis is the answer I think I would give for your question, Mayor.
So you think we would, from what I understand, stand a chance of a legal challenge which we would have to defend and stuff? Okay,
That's a possibility.
all right. Thank you.
Yep.
I've got Councilmember Nichols, Council President Lurick, and then Councilmember Mansfield.
One of the problems I'm having with this curfew is one of just fundamental fairness. I mean, I think most people that have the EMCs, and I'm not a big fan of EMCs, and I understand the problem here, but probably most people are compliant. We've got a few bad actors that keep jacking their sign brightness up, but yet everyone is going to have their signs go dark. And that's, particularly concerning, I would think, to companies that rely on that income, have planned on a 24-hour day, and now they're going to have, 8 hours of their time cut out. And so again, I'm just struggling with the fundamental fairness of the issue. Yeah, that's all for now.
Okay. Council President Lurick.
I agree with what you just said, which is why the curfew is the one part of this that I struggle with. I'm pretty clear where I stand on the rest of it, but I think if we're going to see any legal challenges, as Jared said, it is going to be related to that unfairness or that disparity that is real or perceived. So that the curfew is the one where I feel like I could be swayed. But I did want to also comment, I agree with Rick about the enforcement problem. And I don't like having code that we have trouble enforcing, or we don't, in some cases, sometimes don't even really plan to enforce. It shouldn't be in code if we're not going to enforce it. But I think what I understand with developing this new code is that has driven a lot of the decisions and the changes that you've made, where it becomes very difficult or, near impossible to enforce. That's where you're making a revision to have code that either is easily enforced or there isn't a problem with enforcement because people comply with it. And so you just sort of eliminate that enforcement issue. So other than this issue of enforcing lighted signs, curfews or dimming levels or brightness levels, all of that, it seems like that is the biggest problem with enforcement. And so I appreciate the efforts to try and simplify the code in order to make enforcement less of an issue. And I think that that's probably the best way you can go. The other point, the last thing I wanted to say is that I just want to be clear, I'm not encouraging anybody to Google while driving. You can do that at home before you leave or while you're out. Like I tend to sit in my car and Google things, and then people come up and knock on the window and I freak out. But also often when you're on the highway on a trip, someone else in the car could be doing the Googling of the next stop. So yeah, I just want to be very clear. I'm not promoting being on your phone while driving if you're in your car alone.
I think though Rick has a good point. You might be the exception. because we have had an increase in accidents, and there is an increase in a lot of things, and
Why we have texting while driving codes?
That's
and-
exactly
yeah,
right. It's
not
Because,
enforced.
but
right,
it's a difficult one to do.
it's
so.
very difficult.
So okay, Councilmember Mansfield.
I want to make a counterpoint to the fairness argument. I think our current sign code leads to significantly more unfairness because we don't have the resources to properly and blanket and universally enforce a dimming standard. That means that our enforcement would only be complaint driven. And so if you have a neighbor who's particularly grouchy driving up past Highland High School at 9 o'clock at night, then that's the sign that's going to get called, right, Rick? If you have neighbors who don't care, then you're not going to get called, even if those lights are the brightest ones in the city and don't dim it. And so because of our inability to enforce without the amount and the quite egregious amount of work that would be required in order to check the compliance of these signs, a complaint-driven system that just depends on who your neighbors are and who happens to go by your building at a certain time of day, I think is significantly less fair than just saying, we're going to turn off electronic messaging centers during the nighttime hours. And to me, that is a significantly more equitable system than one that is primarily driven by the level of complaints that you receive, whether or not you are compliant.
And I think we can enforce the code. I think it's just a matter of doing it, and I don't think we've done it. I think we have, it does take a night. You have to go out at night and do it. I think it's just, we just haven't done it. And so I think that if you have a code, you have to go and enforce that code. And I think that part of this is fixable, and that's on the city's end to fix it. My concern is we did go in 2017. We spent, I don't know how many nights out on a bus and how many lights we went and looked at and how many different things we did and how much conversation, hours and hours and hours and days. And then we get this thing that the sign company, the billboard people wanted, and it worked great for, I don't know, 6 months.
15 minutes.
15 minutes maybe, and then it started to inch up and up and up, and now we have a problem. This is driven, this right here in my mind is 100% driven by the billboard sign companies with the, and I shouldn't say billboard, I shouldn't say that because we have businesses, Highland High School, that was a major issue on that anyway. Signs, the EMC signs, that people are just inching them up instead of just staying within code.
Mm-hmm.
It's very simple, and we're upset because I get upset when I get pulled over because I'm speeding. If I didn't speed, I wouldn't be pulled over. This is the same kind of a thing in my mind. It's the same kind of thing. I'm upset now because I turned my light up too much. Well, that's my own fault. And there's no reason for them to happen. Rick is 100% right when he says there is not a shadow cast if they follow that code that the billboard people asked for. At the end of the day, they asked for it. We implemented it. Now today, we're the bad people because we're anti-business or whatever, because They haven't done what they told us they wanted to do. That's what's irritating to me, and I don't know why we don't go and enforce it, quite frankly. I think we should be out there enforcing it. It doesn't take that much. It's gonna be a night a month, maybe a night every 3 months. I don't know what it is, but I don't know why we're not doing that, and I don't know why we're not giving significant citations for it and making it very clear. I don't understand it, and maybe there's not a citation you give for this. Maybe it's just a phone call. I don't know, but if it's just a phone call, we need to add a monetary value to doing this. It's ridiculous that we do what they ask, they don't do what they say they want to do, and so then we're in the middle of this again. And I'm serious when I say this sign ordinance, Brent, you know how many arguments have we had over it in my office?
Oh, yeah.
Sign ordinance and stuff. I hate it with a passion because nobody will follow it the way they claim that they will. And it's irritating. There are different parts of this thing that's easy to solve. The window stuff, I think that's an easy fix. Most of the sign code is pretty simple. It's the EMCs. I mean, I'm going to be straight up. All we're really talking about is EMCs.
Correct.
We're not talking about it. Am I wrong? We're not talking about anything else. In the code, everything else we feel is pretty good. It's the EMCs that we got a problem with. Turn the damn signs down. That's all you have to do. And we have to go out and enforce them. That's all we have to do. Is there a monetary citation or anything for this?
It's a misdemeanor.
It's a misdemeanor.
It's a misdemeanor. Let's start issuing misdemeanors and start calling people and saying, hey, you need to turn it down. Just start doing that. Let them defend it in court because this is what they asked for in court. I don't understand. That's the piece that is very difficult for me to understand. Why we're not just doing that. They asked for it.
And Mayor, we can make the code enforcement happen, but in being realistic, it's a matter of finding the bucket trucks to get up to the eye level.
We got
of the
100 of them at the street department and water and all that stuff. We got,
Don't have to. All you have to be is a distance from the sign, have a 4x4 piece of black painted cardboard. One person holds it up, it blocks the sign from the meter, you take it away and you take the reading and you're done. You don't have to have a bucket truck.
Okay, I've been told that you have to be at eye level with the sign, and
It's the
so,
distance from the sign. And I can't remember what, I think it was 100 feet. I can't remember
Everything I've known about measuring signs, Rick, is that you do have to be at.
we have a sign guy right here. We have a sign guy. Do you have to be up there next to it?
It depends on the height. And I know public comments over, may I make a?
Yeah, I'm asking you to come up here. I asked you a question, so come on, sit down right here.
Thank you.
I only want you to answer the questions, though. I don't want you to go on some other deal. It's a challenge for me because
I
you're
have a
sitting down there.
2-year comment to make.
I know that. That's what I'm afraid of.
All right.
No. If I want to know what the lumas on the sign is, do I have to be in front of it and pointing the machine at it?
It's preferable to be dead on.
Preferable, but there's a lot of things that are preferable in my mind. Is it necessary?
In many cases, not.
Okay. How far away from a billboard do you have to be to?
Depends on the size.
Okay.
The mathematics is the bigger it is, the farther back you go.
Okay. The bigger it is, the further back you go.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So can we get those mathematics?
I'm sure we could find those technical specs that we would have to go through and, yes.
To find it. So
Yeah.
we may not need a bucket truck. It may,
But I do think in lots of instances, the angle that you're at to those signs makes a difference.
okay, help me with that.
It can. Most of the light is directed. You don't want to be at an angle, certainly not. Most light's directed down like this.
So if this behind you is the billboard and I'm here, I'm okay. But if I'm where Councilmember Mansfield is, it's questionable.
Yeah, you don't want to be off at an angle.
Yeah.
Okay.
But also if the height is at an extent that your angle is so far down, that doesn't give you a true reading.
I understand that. That's why you have to go further back from the sign to get that.
But the size of it makes a difference too.
it's a smaller
If it's a
EMC.
smaller sign and it's up high and you're way down low, you're not getting a true reading.
But those signs have a meter on them that measures ambient light. I've been told by 2 different
Yes,
sign companies here in town that
A lot of the newer ones do. We require the capability to dim signs, and they
Right.
have those.
Photo
mesh-
cell, the
Yes.
meter's a writing meter. It's a photo cell that measures the light and then turns the sign down.
Right.
Yeah.
You were there in 2017, if I remember. Were
Yeah.
you there in 2017 with us?
Was.
What was the lumas?
It's 0.3 foot candles above ambient.
0.3 foot candles.
Is it possible for me to make a suggestion here?
Sure.
All right. Some cities have put the burden, I'm hearing all this, some cities have put the burden on the owner of the sign. And the role we play is we have trucks too. So you're driving around, that's too bright, ring the phone, they call a sign company, okay? And we do the reading for you, them, at a fee. We wouldn't do it for free. And we take care of it and we provide an affidavit to show that the measurement is correct. So, we are in big interest to comply. Because we don't like hearing that we're not complying. That's not our role. Our role is to comply and to coach and help our customers to comply.
So how do these signs increase in brightness by themselves?
Thank you. So the light setting with a photocell, when it detects a heavy storm, yesterday was a stormy day, and it gets dark, it flips down to a percentage in the software. So the software allows for a daytime and nighttime brightness. So no one's really complaining about EMCs during the day. Most are at night. So when it gets dark and the photocell says dark, it notifies the software to comply with the percentage, which is sometimes 3%, 5%, depending where the sign is. From 100%, it could be down as low as 2 or 3% of its total brightness based on the ambient light. In a really dark area, the sign will come way, way down off its brightness.
So I guess my question, maybe I need to ask it differently.
Sure.
How does the software, when a cloud comes over, change it from 3 foot candle light to 7?
It's a percentage
Opposed
setting
to-
by the software operator. The software operator has to decide on the setting.
And can that change? Because
Yeah,
obviously
you can change.
we are receiving complaints about billboard signs being too lit, too bright.
Right.
Well, and I want to be clear, Mayor,
But-
that it's not just billboards.
Okay,
It's
well,
all EMCs.
Right, it's a software action. It's a percentage in the software that when it gets dark, it will dim the sign to that percentage. That percentage is changed by the person who's operating the sign.
so whomever owns the sign, billboard or not,
Right.
they've gone in and changed the software from 3.3 candle foot to 0.7 candle foot.
Yeah, it would be a percentage of the total brightness of the sign. So the trick here from the technical aspect is when there's a complaint, the bridge here is gapped by the city saying, just my recommendation, hey, sign owner, that one's too bright to us. And then now it's the obligation of the operator of the sign to confirm with the city that the sign is in compliance. That's done so with a light meter reading, which should be their burden, not yours. If you want to do it, that's fine.
I don't disagree with that,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we are not getting that. Apparently, we're not getting that kind of compliance. Is there a time frame you would recommend that they have to respond? If I have Jen out at 11 o'clock at night
3
and
weeks.
she calls,
Week?
Yeah, 2 weeks, depending on, if
See,
things are busy. So
and
it's rolling a truck and
if
getting
if
someone.
I'm there and I am sitting there and I call you, Mr. Signman, I have a sign, I want you here in 30 minutes, I need to see that. I don't want to give you 3 weeks because I have people that are complaining about 3 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever.
Well, the idea would be an affidavit, a formal document would be submitted at the city to confirm compliance with light meter measurement. And that's not in our draft here. I don't think we've drafted.
No, I don't
anything
think it
together.
is. I don't think it is. I'm just trying to figure out how we get compliance with what you've asked for. We did, but now we don't have the compliance for any of that. And you're telling me I have 3 weeks to wait to get compliance or an affidavit that says, yeah, it's fixed, it's there.
Well, first off, I want to be clear that we want the signs to comply. We are not, and it's in our best interest to be sure that we are cooperative.
100% agree with what you're saying.
Okay, when it comes to a rogue, we've seen them, a rogue operator who's doing this switching of their, let's just inch it up, inch it up, inch it up. The compliance factor, let us help you. Let us help you. We can decide on a reasonable amount of time for us to roll out a light meter, come back with the measurements, and confirm that it is within the 0.3 foot candles above ambient light. Let us help you.
Okay.
Let us help you do that.
Just a minute. I had, and I hijacked this meeting a little bit. I had Councilmember Mangum first, but he's pushing for Mansfield now, and then we'll jump to Mangum.
Who, is it the business or the sign company that operates that software?
The owner.
The owner.
Yes, most commonly. Most commonly. But they're trained by us. You know, we, between this electronic supplier and us, they'll sit in training and say, okay, here's the software. This is how you do your graphics. This is the lighting levels. And this is how it all works. Yeah. So we play a role when they have questions or if staff change, they come to us and say, hey, how do I, if there's no crossover, we get calls all the time saying, how do I run the sign? And we're in the driver's seat to tell them how to operate it. So we can be a great tool to help the city bring this compliance into place.
So with that in mind, and you're training them, why do we have a problem with Highland High School every 3 weeks?
They own the sign. Highland does.
Highland owns the sign,
own
but
the
they're
sign.
training them.
Well, it wasn't Yesco, but
Well, not necessarily yet. I'm sorry. He represents all right now. He's here. We invited all of them.
But that's a good point, though, Mayor, is, okay, you have some sign contractors who are responsible, and you have some who aren't. And so to go back and say, yes, the sign contractor is going to give me this affidavit, do I trust some? Yes. Do I trust others? No. And so I need it to be something that I know I can trust.
Works for all.
So I'm okay.
So then what we could do, and this looks like it's self-serving, that we want to create a revenue line for sign measurement. I hope you understand. We're happy to train on our own nickel, train whoever, the city, whomever, electrical contractors in town. If you want to come up with a set of 3 electrical contractors who are willing to do this, who have the trucks and equipment, okay, we can train them. And so that a customer can pick us or anybody else to go choose to go out and do the light measurements, okay? And they provide an affidavit back to the city to prove that it is, and you trust them. It almost sounds like the fox is watching the hen house here. So maybe that's what's happening. And you may not believe me, they want to comply. Because what happens when we don't comply, we end up in city council meetings for a year and a half, right? Talking about all this. We want to comply. We want the signs to do their job, but within the.
And to stay on.
Okay,
Right.
I've got Councilmember Mangum, and then I've got Councilmember Nichols.
So I agree
And
with this. I think that this is a great alternative and a great resource for us to bring signs into compliance. I think that a fee should be charged to anybody who's not in compliance. And they can have, like you're saying, create a coalition of people to go out and to do it, or they can do it, the city go out and we do it. But we're going to charge a hefty fee if we send somebody out, or they can use a third-party vendor to go do it, but an affidavit is required. I do agree with that 100%. I think that enforcement has been the biggest issue for the majority of issues that we see come before us, because we're not enforcing a lot of our code. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is really putting some teeth into this code and making people come into compliance. I agree with you that sign companies want to be in compliance, or they want the owners who they sell the signs to be in compliance, because they don't want to come before us and hear the mayor say, turn the damn signs down. And so I agree. I think that we really have to do something to buckle down and enforce this. And maybe put Rick on a truck and make him drive around at night.
give me the keys.
Whatever. Don't threaten him with that. Okay, Councilmember Nichols and then Cheatham.
Yeah, so I'm really intrigued with the idea of having a third party maybe go out and check this brightness, pull some burden off of staff. We have an affidavit that could be used perhaps in a prosecution of the issue. But I would also, that could be expanded to, rather than on just a complaint-driven basis, on sort of a random checking of so many signs per month. And perhaps even the increasing of any penalties to repeat offenders of people that have been, shown to keep raising the brightness on their signs. But yeah, the idea is really intriguing to me.
I don't like complaint-driven code enforcement personally, and I think we need to figure a way around the complaint-driven, and when we see something, we just do something about it. But that's a discussion for another day, I'm sure,
Right.
of that.
Yeah, but along those same lines, I mean, what do we have, 98 billboards, I think? Oh, that's total billboards, so I'm not sure of the number of EMCs, but yeah, if we split that out to just be random checked, on a schedule, that might solve a lot of problems, particularly if it's being done by a third party that pulls a lot of the enforcement off of staff.
Okay, Councilmember Cheatham.
Along that same thought, I considered it part of my job when I first got on this council and the sign issue was up. We had enacted that ordinance. I considered it part of my responsibility to watch for enforcement. And that's why Highland High School got on my radar, because I drive by it 2 or 3 times a day. And at night, it was horrible. And it took somebody in district office getting very angry with Highland High School's people who are running that sign to get that solved. But if I may ask Jeff a technical question, one of the things that I noticed when we first did that, we dropped that down to the low lumen amount, or candle power, white became pink. There wasn't enough energy being put out to produce white light. And I heard that was going to be solved. Is that still a technical difficulty with some of these signs?
It's called pink shift. What pink shift is degradation of the blues, I'm sorry to say. So heat and UV attack LEDs. Over time, the blues degrade faster because they run hotter. It's a relatively new technology. It absorbs more of the heat. So when you see the blue degrade, the whites turn pink.
These were brand-new signs.
Yeah, it shouldn't be.
And when they turned them down, the whites turned pink.
That shouldn't be, and the settings, the whole system is very technical and actually intriguing. It'd be fun to spend an hour with you, but we don't have that today. The signs can be tweaked and changed to bring it to that pure white point, and that's a big part of the manufacturing. It's probably a defect. It could be a defect in manufacturing.
And still keeping the candle
Most
power
commonly,
down.
pink shift is a degradation of the blues. I heard of blue shift 6 months ago. I'd never heard of before, where the reds gave out, which is unusual. But
Councilmember Mangum.
So this might be another legal question, but if we were to do kind of like what he's talking about with the enforcement and the testing and whatnot, if we were to select a specific sign company, does that show some kind of favoritism, or do we do it with every sign company's able to do that?
You would
or-
need to do that with a number of 3 or 4 sign companies so that you could rotate through them to not show a favoritism.
We've let out on this a little. We're happy with our trade association. We're happy to train all the other sign companies to do this on our nickel. So, again, we're not looking for, this is not a revenue source for us. We're not looking to create business. We need to take the role of training the industry and train the city if necessary to make sure this compliance issue isn't such a big issue.
Okay, Councilmember Nichols.
So it wouldn't have to be just sign companies that might say bid on this issue, right? It could be done by electrical contractors or general contractors, is that correct?
Right, so one of the reasons we proposed 0.3 foot candles instead of nits is a nit gun is a very expensive piece of equipment. It's hard to use, it's very technical, it's a beautiful little thing, but, and I say gun, it's not really a gun. It just points and detects light. The foot candle linear is really inexpensive. It's less than $200.
We own one.
Well, okay, anybody can really go buy one today. They're readily available. And up on a ladder, measure A, measure B, it's about as simple and straightforward as it could be. And that's why it's Dr. Ian Lewins, the gentleman that the industries, both billboard and the on-premise industries hired to do this work for us. He recommended that light meter, and it makes sense to, we've had hundreds of cities adopt it for the reason of ease of measurement. So we want to help make this easy for you.
And I also want to make it clear that we still kept those standards in the new code. All those same standards rolled over. And so, in the wintertime, when it gets dark at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, those EMCs still have to adhere to that 0.3 foot candle. So those standards are still within this new proposal.
And the photocell does that.
Yes.
When it gets dark, photocell kicks it down.
And the only thing that's different in the new code is that we have proposed a curfew that at 11 o'clock, they either need to turn down to, what was it?
0.1.
0.1, so it's essentially not visible, or turn them off, or provide a black screen. So that's the only thing that's different. The rest of the technical lighting standards, we rolled over into the new code. So I just want to make sure you knew that as well.
So, okay, well, I guess I'll keep running my mouth.
Am I being excused?
Yes, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah,
and
thank
coming
you for
today.
being here.
Yeah.
It sounds to me, it sounds to me like, and I'm sorry, I didn't want to hijack, and I shouldn't have hijacked for the brightness and stuff, but it's just frustrating to me that that's why we're here again.
Right.
Every time we're here because of brightness. And so it sounds like there's a way for us to work around that and a way for us to do that. I will tell you, I have a great concern over the curfew because I do not want to find us in court because we've segregated a group out of the rest of it. And so I think the sign code is written fairly good with a few things. I think your cap is a big question. I think that that the curfew also is a big question. And I did have one question for staff here. If there is a cap put in place and we have new development, are they able to put their pole sign up to represent their business? Or like Pocatello Square has a big sign there that has all of the businesses in there. Is that still allowed or is it not allowed to do that?
It is still allowed and actually encouraged. We have written in the new code a master sign plan for those large developments that they can then bring in a sign plan for their whole development. And they don't have to go through and get a new permit for every little sign within that development. They can get their whole plan approved and just put in their signs. And absolutely, we've increased the size of those, so you don't have a whole bunch of little teeny signs you can't read, which is not helping anybody. And so we've made it much more business friendly for those developments to.
So we've increased the size of an off-premise sign, I'll call, because.
Well, they're not really off from, they're development signs and.
Okay, development signs.
Yes, and so it's a sign that's located for that, like, a whole shopping complex, and they can put individual signs on there. And we don't regulate how they divide that out, but we absolutely allow for that and have made that bigger and easier for them to, and provided more opportunities if it's a large development that they could have multiple ones, whereas they would only have been allowed a single one before.
And then the signs on buildings, we've allowed bigger signs, more footage, and we've allowed more locations.
Correct. We've allowed for signage on all elevations because there's some instances where maybe the back of the building is an advantage for them to put signage. We've increased the size of those so they can provide more signage on their buildings. So the sign code is actually extremely business friendly. And that's been the most irritating thing about this whole process, is that we've been accused of not being business friendly. This is extremely business friendly.
Okay. Rick?
Does the proposed changes have any effect on A-frames on sidewalks and yard signs up and down the streets, or feather signs, those things that seem to pop up? That's the clutter that I see in our community.
We have regulations on those. Depending on the zone that they're in, they're allowed a certain number and a certain size. And we don't regulate the content that they show. They're called temporary signs, is that correct? And so we allow for those, but we have rules associated with those that are easily enforced.
But they're not permitted? I mean, aren't required to get a permit?
No, they aren't required to have a permit, no.
Okay.
Didn't you change them to
Is this a
portable?
change of,
Portable.
in code, or is
Yeah,
that
they're all
just
portable.
existing code we're carrying forward?
It is a slight change. They never were required to have a permit, but we've changed how we address them because they were very content-based in the old code, that, we specified political signs and realtor signs and all these different other types of signage that's content-based, and we're trying to get away from that because of the legal ramifications of that. And so we just allow, we call them temporary signs or portable signs, and they're allowed so big and so many, and that's
So
it.
long.
We don't regulate time frame on them.
So political signs no longer have a limit?
I'm not gonna go out there and regulate that. I'll quit before I have to do that.
So I have a couple other questions for you. What's a snipe sign?
A snipe sign is a sign that is tacked onto like a power pole.
Like a yard sale sign,
Yeah,
for example.
Garage sale.
garage sale or
Yeah.
Garage sale.
we buy houses and
Yeah.
they just nail them onto a power pole and drive off. That's what is a snipe sign.
Okay. And then I have another question. A church, for example, somebody comes in, they buy a thing over on the West Bench. It's got plenty of space for a nice, good-sized, beautiful church. And they want to put a cross that's lit at nighttime. Is that considered a sign? The cross considered a sign or not?
No,
I'd consider it a display.
it would not be a sign.
So that would be permitted with what we're doing here?
Yes.
Okay.
Does someone have plans for that?
Well, no, but I'm thinking, as I was actually driving home from Boise the other night, and as you drive through American Falls, there's a church off to as you're coming east, off to your right, that's got a sign it's not a sign, it's a display that is lit. And
Very large.
I started thinking, well,
Yeah.
is that permitted here or is it not?
And that's where signage is so hard to regulate, because you start getting those gray areas, and we try to define what a display is, what a sign is, and try to be very careful. Now, are we gonna have situations where we start scratching our heads and we have to decide what it is? Absolutely. And we can't address every single situation for every single thing. It's just not possible especially with signage.
Okay. All right. Comments? So
What are
we're,
next steps, I guess?
well, we're really truly looking for direction on what we want to do and where you want to go. You had two options here. I suggest you make a third option, which would include parts of both options probably, but we kind of need some direction for an ordinance to come next week. Legal needs direction to write an ordinance, planning needs direction to help, and what we're looking at, so.
How do you feel about the third-party monitoring of nighttime, of EMCs at night?
It's just the question of who's gonna pay for it.
I struggle to continue to increase costs on that matter for the enforcement of, after what I feel like has been pushing the limits in past, and I think you expressed that properly. And that's been my frustration in the 3 years that I've been on council. I'm in favor of a sign ordinance that still has the curfew and still has the cap on billboards.
So I've got a favor. That wasn't a motion or was it a motion?
No, I don't know if we need motion or if we just want to go down the
No,
line
I
and just say,
I think that's.
go what we're in
let's go
favor
down
of.
the-
So
Let's
I'll
go down the line.
Let's go down the
not
line.
do
I'll
a
start.
motion.
I think cost-wise and proper enforceability means curfew's the easiest one, and I still support the cap on billboards. That's where I'm at.
Okay. Okay.
I am against the curfew. I am 100% in favor of enforcement, and if possible, using a third party to do so. The billboards, torn on that, but I'm in favor of the cap on the billboards. And I think that's really it, right? Is that all? Yeah.
Okay.
Curfew and cap.
You're in favor of both?
Yes.
Okay.
And is anybody picking a version?
Nobody's done that yet, picked a version. I
'Cause I
think,
guess the cap is version 2, so.
Those were, to me, the two biggest, most controversial matters.
And just to be clear, the curfew is in both options.
Right.
Only
But the
difference
cap
between
is
the two,
not.
Cap or no cap.
It may be easier to make a motion based off of not necessarily
issue.
which version you want, but what do you want included in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any other significant differences or matters that we need to decide besides those two things?
The only thing I've heard brought up that I just want to be clear on has to do with window displays. So right now, in the code that was provided to you, and I'm looking on page 8 of version 1, and I'm on page 8, number 6. It says window signs. Such signs shall count towards the total building area allowed and shall not exceed a maximum of 50% coverage of window space per building elevation. Window graphic displays or coverings adhered or mounted to on the glass that do not clearly follow the definition of a sign shall still meet coverage of window signs. So it basically is saying, does a display need to meet the same standards? And I just want clear guidance on, do you like the idea of having open window space as you look into a business? Or, as I've heard some say, let the windows be covered with displays if that's what a business chooses to do. That's the only other thing that I think that I would want clarification on in regards to writing the right code.
And staff prefers ability to see in for
Correct.
safety purposes,
Safety
for,
purposes.
Aesthetics.
okay. So on adding that third matter, then I'd be in favor of the 50% as written.
Leaving it as
Leaving
is.
it as is. 50% coverage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
okay, we'll come back to Mangum and Paulson about the windows.
I'm okay with the off-premises sign cap, but not the curfew. I think enforcement's a better way to go on that. And I'm good with leaving the display at 50%.
I am in favor of the cap. I am good with leaving the 50% window display. I will say if I can't see into a business, I'm much less inclined to go in there. I think it helps the business to have some part of their window open, and it's a safety issue too. On the curfew, I am torn. I think the simplest way to deal with it is to leave it. Is to have it, not leave it, but to have a curfew. And to Josh's point about fairness that, I mean, we've heard arguments on both sides that there might be a disparity, but maybe it is more fair to have it. So I'm really torn on the curfew. I guess I'll see how the majority goes here.
Well, you're part of this, and so right now it's
Okay, I don't get
it's
to
tied
say.
right now, so you don't, I want to wait and see how everybody else feels. It doesn't work for us.
I'm going to say yes.
Yes on the curfew, okay?
No on cap? No on curfew? We got a whole quadra over there of code enforcement officers, and I think they can take care of inspections. I'm also not in favor of a window covering limit.
No limit. Okay. Well, I'll just, because I have to weigh in here on the curfew, because Linda wanted to wait to see what happened. I'm the only one that gets to do that, and it's because it's a tie. I think there's some legal challenges. I hate to say it, because I think that if it were just me, I would like to see all the signs dimmed, if nothing else. But I think we've got a legal challenge that I think we have a hard time winning that legal challenge on a curfew. So I'm going to say no on a curfew, just simply because I don't think I honestly don't see us winning a case because we allow everybody else and everything else. And so I'm going to say that the window display, I think you let businesses do what businesses do. And I shouldn't weigh in on that right now because we've got 3 and a 1. And I've got 2 more that haven't said yes or no to it right here. But I know of buildings that have one-way, one-directional windows that you can't see inside. And they don't have any signage on it. And so I think you let businesses do business with the windows. And is it safety? Yeah, there's probably some safety factors. If I'm a business person, or if I have a retail business of some sort that I'm putting stuff on the windows, I'm probably not covering all of my windows up. I'm probably not. But I think I would leave it up to businesses to do that. And so I would disagree with the 50% on the windows, but I may not have a vote there. Corey, you're up. Councilmember Mangan. Windows.
Windows during the day, like at my branch, we do have those one-way windows. So during the day, you can't see in. In the evening, you can see in. And so for me, it's kind of just like you can't see, so it doesn't really matter. But I like the idea of businesses doing business and letting us paint our windows, and so yeah.
So what is it?
I thought I answered the question.
You're a yes. You're a yes to the 50%.
No 50. No 50.
No 50. Okay.
100%.
I say yes, 50% as is.
Okay, and you've got yes, 50% as is, and I've already expressed my opinion.
Is that a tie?
But no, it doesn't tie it. I've got 4 yeses. I don't even get an opinion on that one. Dang it. Okay,
We were 4-2?
4-2 on that one.
Okay.
That said 50% windows. So what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is the curfew is out. We're going to be doing enforcement, and we want to have a serious discussion about third-party stuff, it sounds to me like, and all of that mess, if that's what we need to do. A cap is in. Windows, 50%. That's what it looks like there. Okay, here we go.
Bringing 2 tablets, we're in trouble.
I know it.
A lot going on here. Again, Jared Johnson, City Attorney. I would like to bring up one issue for clarification for drafting of an ordinance. Right now, under our current version, as I understand it, and our proposed versions, which we have some guidance on now, it does have some very specific language, and I apologize to Brent and Jen for not having this conversation with them beforehand. It's kind of all happening at the same time. We do have some very specific language as to how that measurement is taken. A lot of today's discussion has been about enforcement, the ease of enforcement, third-party enforcement. I have some concerns about that from a prosecution standpoint. But I would like to work with them to rewrite or at least tweak a little bit the illumination testing process so that enforcement is easier. As it's written now, it almost, as I understand it, and I'm no sign expert, but I've been here with all of you for a long time doing this for a few different versions. We would have to have control of the sign in order to do a true reading, whether it's us or a third party. If the third party is a different company from the company that installed or built the sign, that might be problematic. So with your permission, between now and when this comes before you, I would like to play with that and make that more user-friendly for the city. Does that make sense?
So may I, Mr. Mayor? The current ordinance requires control of the sign to make a measurement?
Well, let me read it to you, because maybe it doesn't, but I think it does. Because it says, illuminescence shall be measured when the EMC is off, and again when displaying solid white for a full color capable EMC, or a solid color for a single color EMC. So to me, that says we got to have some control of what's on that sign while we're actually pointing the device at the sign. So that might be a problem that we need to clean up a little bit as well, so that we can go out. We could probably, working with experts, dumb this down a little bit so that we can get a reading that's reliable for enforcement. It's got to be reliable for prosecution. It's got to meet all the thresholds of the rules of evidence, but is doable without having a committee of owners and installers and manufacturers and city people all there at the same time trying to get a reading that is compliant with our ordinance. Because if we don't follow this and we go into court and we say they were 0.7 foot candle over ambient, but we didn't do it exactly perpendicular, we didn't follow the measurement distance, and we didn't have it completely white and then completely black, that's not gonna hold up in court.
So we basically need the ability to turn it on and off.
Under its current writing, on and off, and when it's on, we have to control whether it be white or a solid color if it's only a single color EMC.
Is that necessarily having control, or is that working in conjunction with the owner?
That's what I mean by having control. If we would need the owner there or somebody that has the ability to shut it off for one reading and turn it completely white or completely the single color that it is for the other reading, and then we would be able to get our actual readout. That's problematic from an enforcement and a proof standpoint.
Councilmember Mansfield.
If I might also add, before I ask Jared a question, I think the other concern that has then, if we have to have the owner be there to demonstrate these things, if I got a notice that I need to be at my business at midnight in order to demonstrate this sign, I'm going to go fix the software real quick and turn it back where it needs to be. So I see another enforcement concern. Jared, I want to speak real quick and ask you a question about the concern that Mr. Mayor brought up, and maybe this doesn't sway your mind at all, but let's say, for example, we did receive a legal challenge to the curfew. What would the consequences be if we lose that?
We would have to pay the difference in economic loss.
What would what do you think the liability is there?
I think it's unlikely because most takings analysis research that we've done, economic loss has to be practically complete, practically total economic loss. And a third of their business time at their non-peak hours is probably not enough to meet that threshold. But again, there's varying decisions as to what that means, how much economic loss is actually a takings. And you've heard me say before, I don't like to be landmark cases. So that's why, I think that's also why, well, we're not theoretically, this is just guidance, but if we do adopt an ordinance that doesn't have the curfew, we don't have that delayed implementation question before you anymore. But if we were going to have a curfew, I would be pushing for as long delayed implementation as possible to give them time not only to bring their equipment up to standard, but their contracts and their revenue sources up to catching up to that as well. So, but that may be a moot point.
Okay. All right. So I'm hearing you want more time to work with them to find out what's happening
We'll
with
refine
this
that part.
on that part. So my suggestion, council, and I don't really want to drag it out, if we've had our public hearing for this, if we put this off another month, so you can get through that stuff, does that public hearing still work or no?
Yes, it does. These are all issues that have already been through the public hearing process at planning and zoning and in front of you all, so.
Multiple times.
Yeah, so wouldn't need, now, if we were coming up with an all-new subject to throw in here that nobody has considered, then yeah, we would have to go back and start that process over, but that's not the situation.
Okay, well, council, I'm just thinking here, if we bring this back to the next work session after they've worked through this so that we understand what that third party or what that looks like, is that a reasonable thought on my mind?
Yeah.
To do this?
October.
So why don't we plan on doing that? That gives you an opportunity to do something there. We might see if Jeff won't circle up with you and double check and make sure everything, and just so that you can have an expert in there talking about the foot candles and all that mess as well and how to do that.
For clarification, I have no idea what the better way is to measure. I just know that this way is really difficult, not only to perform, but then to carry over into an enforcement setting. The point of enforcement, if we're not going to put it in, if we're not going to enforce it, let's not put it in. And to me, enforcement means possibly taking it all the way to court. And this would be really tricky. So there's some work to be done there. And we'll do our best to get that done within the next month.
Okay. All right, is that fair? Okay, then let's plan on that. I think you have direction on everything but that.
Thank you so much for the direction.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for your work on this.
Thanks, Jeff.
Jeff, thank you for being here today. Appreciate it and appreciate your comments, and sorry I put you on the spot. Thank you for representing all also right there. That
Thank you
was,
for being here.
yeah, for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, then with that, council, we're going to move to council advisory board updates.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
can I request to go first? I had a meeting I didn't think I'd make, but I might if I go first and hurry.
Yeah, absolutely. You're up.
Great. I was sick during the last Arts Council committee meeting, so I will follow up and touch base with them, but I have not yet. For the library, they're starting to discuss kind of what the future and long-term solutions are going to be for the library, given the budgetary concerns that we had during the last meeting, during our budget session, about, they just know that they're hitting their limit for levy capacity. And so that was just the concern that was, I think, brought and discussed there. And I think is aware, and the entire library board is aware now of, and kind of thinking about this problem. I think it's a good place to be. And then for the CCOG, Southeast Idaho Council of Governments, I would please recommend, I'm currently on the revolving loan fund board, and what an amazing program that is. What an amazing program. And I'm seeing these businesses in other cities, like Preston, for example, is the most recent, that are receiving these loans despite poor credit and for opportunities for them to invest in their communities. And if you know of businesses that want to expand, that want to invest in additional infrastructure, that are wanting to purchase instead of lease their buildings, relocate, hire more staff, start up, whatever they are, please send them over to CCOG, because it is an amazing loan program for small businesses that want to develop in our community. And so being on that board is just such a pleasure.
Who do we contact there, by the way?
His name's Matt. I'll get contact and I'll send an email out to the council members.
Okay.
But if you were just to call CCOG's main number as well, they would direct you to where you need to be.
Okay.
Are there minimums and maximums for those loans?
I don't believe so, no. I've seen some that have been incredibly small for just like additional equipment for a medical practice, for example. And I've seen some where they've purchased buildings outright using them. And so quite big differences. And the most recent one that we did was they had some personal things in their life that made their credit worse. And so their credit wouldn't have qualified them for business loans. And so with CCOG, we paired the loan with another financial institution in order to get them the necessary resources for this business. Just an incredible program.
That's awesome.
Good
Yeah.
deal. Thank you.
Great. Thanks,
you for
everybody. If
that.
I might
Good
be
luck getting to
excused.
your meeting.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
So
Member Mangum.
due to lack of business, we postponed the golf committee meeting, the most recent one. So I have nothing to update there. With the housing authority, we have, things are going great. Just appointed a new president of their board. They've got tons of vouchers that they're still looking to get out into the community. They are, the nightmare is basically over there. There was a lot of turmoil and issues going on with this new executive director and the new board that they have. Things are running fairly smoothly and fairly well. And they've got some great programs, some resource programs and pantries and things like that, that they're exploring and using to impact the community. So they're doing a great job over there. Neighbor Works Pocatello is a great organization. They're doing some great things. They have their historic home tour coming up this Saturday, September 14th at 10 a.m. Tickets are $20. They've got some great houses on the ballot for, not the ballot, but on the itinerary for display. And they've got some great people in the community who are going to be volunteering and helping with the said tour.
Sounds good, thank you. Councilmember Paulson.
They're resuming now because school's back in session, so I've had childcare providers, workers, etc. They're freaking out about ICCP, enrollment pause. Basically just funds are tight and it's not getting better. So.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so two of my committees meet quarterly, so I don't have anything new to report. And the Human Relations Advisory Committee, I missed that meeting, so I don't have anything to report there either.
Okay.
I'm on one of your quarterly ones, the Audit and Investment Committee. We haven't met again, so
Okay.
nothing to report. Bannock Transportation, we met this week. And you all can add to this. We made some amendments to our TIP plan. We continue to move forward with how we plan to find a replacement for the executive director for Maury. And those were kind of the main things. I'll let you add if you have other stuff. PDA, we met, we're meeting again next week, but we did meet a month ago, and we approved our budget, and we were also discussing some things in executive session that are going to be brought forward publicly, I believe, at this upcoming meeting. So I can't mention what those are until they come out in that meeting. So other than that, not a whole lot went on in that meeting. And then lastly, Historic Downtown Pocatello Board. And there was a lot going on there. There's some really exciting plans that unfortunately are secret for Christmas that they're already starting to work on. I complained because I said we haven't even had Halloween yet, but they're getting ready, so that's a good thing. And it's going to be some really different stuff, so look forward to that. And just to sort of continue with their plan, I mean, now the underpass is open, so they're not worried about, you know, sort of trying to get people down there with that being closed. But they had a plan in place to do that, and it worked really well. The summer was very successful, a lot of events, new things added. They're working with Centennial Rotary. We approved the ability to get permission to put a peace pole, in 2 locations. One is at Lookout Point, and Historic Downtown Pocatello chose that location and approved it. And just good stuff happening. Looking forward to the fall and continuing events, and I encourage people to go down there.
Super, thank you.
The airport, all three of my committees met this week, so it's all fresh in my mind. The airport, we're going to be seeing a change in our Saturday 3:30 flight. Effective very soon, it's going to be canceled completely. That flight is not producing either incoming or outbound passengers, so it's going to be going away. And in the interim, there will be a few days of cancellation of the during week 3:30 flight also. During week will continue, but they've got some maintenance, apparently some maintenance coming up at the airline that's going to require that flight, that airplane is going to be diverted elsewhere for a bit. So if you're making reservations, if you don't make a connection on a Wednesday or something, it isn't because it's gone, it's just that day it isn't available. But the Saturday flight is going away in the near future. Also, you probably already heard about the flight school, that we've agreed to do that flight school and rented a space, but they haven't shown up yet. And we're not sure exactly why they haven't proceeded with the remodeling plans and renovation of that building.
And they just got us the contract back, I think last week, and so.
I was told Monday it wasn't back yet.
Well, maybe it was this week, then they got it back, but apparently we've got it back, and they just barely got it back, and they're still coming this direction.
Also, Idaho State University is looking at expanding their aeronautics training program at the university. And they may want, rumor has it, they may want to expand their current space at the airport. The hangar that they're in, that they use as a school, there's a vacant space to the west of it. And they may want to take that and look at expanding that school into an additional facility. Medic transportation, I'll make one comment on what Linda said. One of the things in the TIP plan that I was concerned about is Hawthorne and Quinn. That is an increasingly busy intersection, both as an east-west thoroughfare and as a north-south to go into the interstate. And expansion of that is not scheduled until 2046. And I think waiting 22 years to do that is way too long. And we need to see what, as a city, we can do to help move that up in the planning project.
Hawthorne Quinn, the one we just signalized?
Yeah, the expansion of the roads and right-of-ways and 3 lanes and all that is in the 2046 plan, which, I mean, to me, if we wait that long, we're gonna have another Jefferson, a street that's too late to do anything about because we didn't take action when maybe we still could have. So, just so it's on your mind. And the senior center, renovation is underway on the Lowe's project, that $144,000 grant. I was over there yesterday, and they've got all kinds of fixtures and stuff stored in one room, and there's a couple of guys in there working rapidly to remodel one of the bathrooms now and get that moving, so that's going along very well. Senior Center Board elections are coming up. Applications are due in October. The election will be in November, and then the people will be seated in December, but they actually don't take office until January 1, so that's coming up. And, God, I made notes now, I can't read my own writing. They've been losing money. The cost of the meals has gone up slightly again. They got a 25-cent increase in the reimbursement from CCOG, and it's costing them a little over $11 per meal to serve meals that is not being reimbursed. The average donation is 89 cents last month, which is down from 90 cents a month before.
How is that possible? $11 per meal? I'm not saying feed bad food, but that seems expensive.
The unique thing about what they provide over there, it's only from 11 to 1 o'clock, but there are people in there preparing and cleaning up and doing that. So we're paying salaries all day long for a very narrow window. And they're using food bank quite a bit to help supplement food costs. It isn't food costs, it's labor costs that are eating them alive over there. But they're losing a little over $11 per meal that they serve, and their donations for those who are receiving the meals are not even coming close to keeping up with the cost of what it is. And the reimbursement that they're getting is $3.50 right now, and it was $3.25. So they did really well in their golf tournament. the car show this year. Final numbers aren't in on the golf tournament yet, but they'll clear some money there. This month, if you take out the Lowe's money that they paid for the loads that they're gonna get reimbursed for, they lost about $300. Last month, they lost about $8,000. So it's a bit of a process underway, but it's, the center looks better than it has in years with all of the community work that's gone over there with carpeting and cleaning and painting and new equipment, and the place looks fantastic. The city went in and did the sidewalk on the west side, and to prevent the further flooding of that building when we get the winter storms and the summer cloudbursts. So it's in good shape. The Bonneville neighborhood is going to be going in and redoing the playground on that park on the corner. They're gonna put in a new bocce ball court, whatever that amounts to. And they're putting in new playground equipment. They're doing a lot of work. They got about a $40,000 grant that they're going to be working on for that. And in talking to Ann, she said the park's plans are, don't know if it'll be this year or next, but we've got a lot of crumbling sidewalks in that grassy area just to the east of the senior center. And it's brick and it's heaved, it's a trip hazard, and they're planning to go in and try and take care and refurbish that area also.
I was just gonna
End of
add,
report. Oh,
Bonneville neighborhood, Lasting Legacy Barbecue is September 28th, Saturday, 11 to 2 I have here. But they were talking, a couple of their members were talking to me at the rec center ribbon cutting and saying that they wanted to do something with us, like a ribbon cutting or some kind of acknowledgement when they have the playground equipment and the stuff that they.
Yeah, we'll get all that.
right now, it looks like that may not happen until spring.
Yeah, probably not. But I would encourage people, if you can, go to the barbecue.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you. I've got my Mayor's Youth Advisory Committee. We met for the first time this year, the school year, I mean. We met, we've got a couple elections coming up for some of the officers there, and we're just starting out. In fact, if you would like to join us at our next meeting, which will be in 2 weeks from Monday, last Monday, you can join us up on, as we go up and clean the trail on City Creek, the road that goes up City Creek Trail. You'd be more than welcome to come and help us clean that if you'd like to. But other than that, things are good. So thank you, council. Thanks for working through everything today. It was kind of a long meeting this morning, but with that, we are adjourned.